Chapter 607. The pirates let out a cry of surprise. Lu Baishui must have a high prestige in these people's hearts. They had seen Xiaxing's ferocious appearance and the mysterious means he used. But when he saw that Master Lu was injured, he shouted and thrust his spear forward. The 9 light swords protecting Xiaxing's body immediately reacted. They made a soft sound and formed a light curtain in the blink of an eye, sweeping toward the crowd. Not only the spear was easily broken, but the wrists of the people holding the spear were also cut off. The lightsabers were extremely sharp. They didn't feel pain until the spear and the hand fell to the ground. Suddenly there were screams and the smell of blood spread. Lu Baishui frowned and shouted, "Go back. No one move. Go back." The pirates cared about him and he cared about his subordinates. After such a shout, everyone knew that they were no match for him, so they could only glare at Xiaxing. Although they didn't retreat, they didn't fight anymore. "I don't want to kill more people. And I don't want to cause trouble," Xiaxing said coldly, "so you should know. If you don't answer my questions, you will die. Now." Lu Baishui stared at him for a while and suddenly laughed. "Okay. I will tell you, someone told me about you." Li Yunxin smiled in the crowd. But Lu Baishui was silent after saying this. Xiaxing waited for a while and frowned, and nothing. Xiaxing looked at him deeply. "You want to tell me that you only know this much?" "Of course I know a lot." Lu Baishui smiled, "But I won't tell you." "Huh." Xiaxing snorted. Then his fingers moved slightly. The lightsaber that cut Lu Baishui's hair slowly moved downwards, through his forehead, nose, lips, chin, neck, and finally stopped at his chest. The lightsaber moved silently. But slowly, a line of blood appeared. Lu Baishui's whole face was cut in half by a thin line of blood. The lightsaber cut his skin. Then more and more blood gathered and flowed down his face. It seemed to be some kind of demonic and evil makeup. "I have a way to cut you open alive without killing you. I can let you see how your heart beats and how your intestines move." Xiaxing said, "You only have one life. Don't be stupid." Lu Baishui touched the blood on his lips and looked at it. Then he looked at Xiaxing calmly. "I was entrusted by someone, so I'll do my best. If you want to say that I'm being foolish, I've been foolish for decades. I've seen the sharpest knives and the strongest liquors. What's death to me?" Xiaxing sneered. "Of course death is nothing. But before you die," as he said this, Lu Baishui suddenly lifted his hand and tore off his coat. Thus his upper body was exposed. Xiaxing was stunned. The merchants on the deck were also stunned. His chest was no different from an ordinary person's. But on his back, abdomen, and ribs, there were densely packed red runes. However, upon closer inspection, one would realize that they were not tattoos. Instead, it was a scar that had healed after the burn. There seemed to be a strange light in Lu Baishui's eyes. He slightly raised his head and looked at Xiaxing disdainfully. "The holy fire shines brightly, the holy light shines brightly. What joy is there in life, what suffering is there in death? Do you know how I got these runes on my body? After I joined the sect, the first thing I received was the holy fire commandment. I used a red-hot knife to slowly burn the damning scripture on my body. How is this pain compared to your methods?" The pain brought by burning was indeed the most severe pain that a human could feel. Xiaxing knew this clearly. He stared at Lu Baishui suspiciously and coldly for a while, then said, "You're so righteous now. Why did you ask me about this before?" Lu Baishui sneered, "Even if I'm loyal to someone, I have to find out whether it's true or not. I just don't want to be stupid. Now that I know it's true, if you still want to ask, just kill me." Xiaxing stared at him for a while and his expression became cold. He moved his finger. At this moment Li Yunxin's finger also moved. Ordinary people only felt that a moment had passed, but it was enough for cultivators and demons to do many things. Xiaxing made a hand gesture, activated the spirit energy in the ocean of qi and mountain of snow, and sent an order to the light sword that was formed by his own spirit energy outside his body. As soon as the order was given, the light sword immediately cut Lu Baishui's chest in half. And at this moment, Li Yunxin also sent out a fierce demon power. This demon power was about to break Xiaxing's protective light sword and make his dharma lose its effect. But after this moment both of them changed their minds. The giant ship suddenly shook. But at this moment the sky was still blue. The sea between the Taowu and the Haizong suddenly became turbulent. It was as if a terrible force was stirring the water under the sea, or like a volcano that couldn't suppress its anger. With a loud bang, a water column suddenly surged up from the sea. This water column was even higher than the ship's railing, but not a single drop of water splashed outwards. The seawater was tightly gathered in one place and became solid. On top of this transparent water column, the water splashed open, revealing a general wearing a white helmet and armor. This general seemed to be a junior general. He had red lips and white teeth, was neatly dressed and held a three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand. His expression was dark and his eyes were wide open, staring straight at Xianxia who was on the deck. After staring for a breath's worth of time, his body slightly leaned forward. The wave that was supporting him then moved towards the Taowu, all the way to the side of the ship. The two huge ships were still moving swiftly with their sails flapping. The wave under his feet followed the two ships steadily and did not fall at all. He reached the side of the ship but didn't jump off the wave. He only looked down at Xianxia and shouted, "I'm General Fubo under the command of the Eastern Sea Dragon King. Who dares to use Dharma on the Eastern Sea?" Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked. The pirates were fine. Swords and soldiers always gave people an inexplicable sense of confidence. So they all clenched their weapons. Although they were surprised and panicked, they didn't go too far. But the merchants were different. They were all businessmen and very few of them were hot-blooded. But now they saw a so-called General Fubo with their own eyes. First, 3 people fainted without saying a word. The rest all knelt on the ground as if they were blown by the wind, shouting, "Dragon King, help us," and so on. Xianxia was also among the crowd. He sighed, and sat down cross-legged, watching the show. He turned into a young boy not very tall. A group of men in front of him were kowtowing, which covered him. But even if he didn't cover himself, the demon who called himself General Fubo didn't notice him. Because at this time Lu Baishui smiled and pointed at Xianxia. "General. He was the one who used Dharma just now. He even threatened me with the lives of hundreds of people on these 2 ships. General, please investigate." When Xianxia used Dharma to threaten him, he didn't panic at all. Now that something strange had happened on the sea, and a demon who called himself General Fubo appeared, he didn't panic. Looking at this demon was like looking at a general in the secular world. Xianxia frowned slightly and stared at Lu Baishui. He had misjudged. He didn't see that this person had so many stories. But it wasn't that he had become stupid, and it wasn't that Lu Baishui was the smartest person in the world. But he didn't want to see things the way he used to. At least after he said goodbye to Lu Gongzan in the forest of Dingzhou. When looking at a person, he began to try not to use his own subjective will to define this person's identity. He began to try to see and think like a stranger. When he first saw a person, that person was a blank piece of paper. He slowly interacted with this person, and then based on what he saw and heard, he added something to this blank piece of paper. He was trying to feel the feeling of being an ordinary person. But now it seemed that it wasn't going well. Lu Baishui wasn't the kind of person he thought. At least he wasn't as simple as he thought. In fact, he should have seen it a long time ago. Now that he carefully recalled the various details of his interaction with Lu Baishui, he realized that there were indeed many suspicious points. The problem was that everyone would look suspicious. Even a person with a broad mind would have some expressions on their face that would make people suspicious. If you looked at them with colored glasses. This meant that to ensure one's safety and sobriety, one must limit one's world to a very small area. One must not have too many interactions with others and not exchange too much information with others. Without interaction and exposing one's world, one didn't need to worry about what others would do to him. One didn't need to spend time to carefully analyze and observe everyone. If he really did that, he would die of exhaustion. In fact, even in the secular world, many people followed this principle of survival. As the saying goes, you may know a person's face but not his heart. People who often gave their feelings and sincerity were more likely to be hurt. If they were tired and afraid because of this kind of hurt, they would protect themselves. They only had 2 or 3 close friends. When they met strangers, they would only talk to them or just ignore them. In the eyes of others, this kind of person was indifferent and not easy to get along with. But it was indeed the best way to protect oneself. If one didn't give his feelings, it would be difficult for others to hurt him. Indifference was also a kind of barrier. But it was also cowardice in another sense. Xianxia used to have this kind of cowardice, but now he was trying to get rid of it. He sighed. He went to see Xianxia and that General Fubo. The appearance of this demon seemed to mean that the East Sea Dragon King did exist. What Lu Baishui said to him while chatting was all true. It also meant, Lu Baishui. He seemed to have a closer relationship with the East Sea Dragon King. On this ship, there should be a shopkeeper of the East Sea Kingdom named Munanju. Munanju. Interesting. Hearing Lu Baishui's words, General Fubo turned his eyes to him. He stared at him up and down for a while, then waved the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand. Instantly, a layer of mist formed between him and Xianxia, separating the two of them. No one doubted that this layer of mist could block. Xianxia didn't seem to doubt it either. So, following his usual temperament, he frowned slightly and put the 10 light swords back to his side to protect himself. He used to live in the demon's cave, so he had seen the demon's abilities. So, even though he didn't fight with people often, he could tell that this demon general's cultivation wasn't weaker than his. And they were on the sea, so he had to be careful. So he said in a low voice, "Since you are a general under the East Sea Dragon King, you should also be a general under the Shinryu. I am not an enemy of the Shinryu but an ally." But the demon general didn't even look at him. He first protected Lu Baishui, then praised, "What a beautiful person. You should be a good person. Who are you?" Li Yunxin laughed in his heart. This demon general was quite interesting. He first looked at Lu Baishui's appearance and said, "You should be a good person," then asked who he was. Lu Baishui paused for a moment, then laughed and cupped his fists. "You have good eyesight. I am Lu Fei. I have some relationship with the East Sea Dragon King. Since you are the great General Fubo under the Dragon King of the East Sea, you must be highly valued, so you should have heard of me." The demon general let out a sound of surprise. He carefully looked at him, then finally smiled. "You are Lu Fei?" "Yes. I have indeed heard of you in front of the Dragon King. You are very beautiful, you really are a good person." At first, his face was as calm as water, his lips were tightly shut, and he looked very imposing and dignified. But now when he grinned, his face was revealed. His grin was so wide that it reached his ears. His mouth was filled with sharp teeth, not the top row or the bottom row, but the entire mouth was filled with densely packed fangs. Some of the braver ones saw that he was talking to Lu Baishui in a friendly manner, so they raised their eyes to sneak a peek at him. Now that they saw his appearance, they were scared out of their wits and quickly buried their heads again. This demon general seemed to know that his mouth was scary. He just smiled, then quickly closed his mouth again. Then he turned around and frowned at Xianxia. "Who are you? How do you threaten a good person?" Xianxia took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled. He repeated what he had said before. "Since you are a general under the Dragon King of the East Sea, you should also be a general under the Shinryu." "I am an ally of the Shinryu." The demon general immediately shouted, "Hey! Who do you think you are? You don't deserve to mention the Lord of the Shinryu." He raised his eyebrows and looked Xianxia up and down again, seeming to be angrier. "You are so ugly, you are definitely not a good person. My mistress hates ugly people the most. It doesn't matter if you are ugly but you dare to use Daoist techniques on the sea. But do you know that my mistress hates people like Dao Tong and Kenzo the most?" Li Yunxin laughed again. He felt his mood lighten. This demon general was really cute. If there was any conflict in the future because of what he said today, he would be spared. Xiaxing's face was extremely ugly after being scolded by this demon general. This place was not like land. If he encountered such a situation on land, the smartest thing to do would be to run away. But now, he was surrounded by water. Even if he escaped, where would he find a boat and how would he get back to land? An emptiness realm cultivator in the vast sea was just a drop in the ocean. To him, the current situation was like a stranger to him. But something strange happened. Before this great General Fu Bo appeared, the water between the two huge ships surged violently. But just as the demon general finished his rebuttal, the surface of the sea suddenly began to shake again. Before anyone could figure out what was going on, a huge beast covered in jet-black scales suddenly jumped out of the sea. It swallowed this great General Fu Bo in one gulp and then fell back into the sea. This demon general was still awe-inspiring just a breath ago. But now that he was swallowed whole, he didn't even make a sound. Everyone saw it clearly. The head of the huge beast that jumped out of the sea was as big as a huge ship, and its body was even more terrifying. When its head fell back into the sea, its body was only halfway out of the water. As for its head, it was a dragon's head. Seawater splashed on the deck, drenching a large number of people. However, the poison that was supposed to kill upon contact had actually lost its toxicity at this moment. Not only were the mortals stunned, even Lu Baishui and Xiexing were stunned. Not only Lu Baishui and Xiexing were stunned, but even Li Yunxin was stunned. After a full 3 breaths, he widened his eyes and clenched his teeth. If that guy was in front of him now, he would definitely curse. Ninth young master, what the hell are you doing now? Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Note 1. The holy fire shines, the holy light shines. What joy is there in life, what bitterness is there in death? These 4 sentences are quotes from the online game, Sword Hero Online version 3. When the disciples of the Ming cult entered the sect. Here is the explanation. Chapter 608. It was supposed to be a good situation. He mingled with these smelly mortals just to find a chance to sneak into the Dragon Island or find out the situation around the Dragon Island. He was not some kind of perverted masochist who liked to be surrounded and questioned by a bunch of idiots. Now a General Fubo who recognized Lu Baishui jumped out. If this demon took these 2 ships to the East Sea Dragon King, not only could he find Shangguan Yu's whereabouts, but he could also get information about the Dragon Island. Most importantly, he had been hiding his identity all along, so Lu Baishui didn't know much about him. But now he swallowed it. He had to find it from the beginning again. But Lu Baishui and Xiexing were at loggerheads. If this General Fubo died, there would be no turning back. Something that could have been solved perfectly. Now he had to take action and expose himself. Li Yunxin felt that he was about to become an incense burner. Smoke was coming out of his 7 orifices. He looked at Lu Baishui and Xiexing. They were also looking at each other. Lu Baishui didn't know what swallowed General Fubo. He clearly saw the dragon's head. Could a giant creature with a dragon's head belong to the Dragon King of the East Sea? Xiexing was also shocked. He also didn't know the origin of the monster that swallowed General Fubo. It might be the East Sea Dragon King. He had been with demons for more than 10 years, so he knew that some demons looked like humans and some looked like beasts. It wasn't a big deal to eat or kill a demon general under his command. Because of these uncertain guesses, neither of them moved. They looked calm on the surface, but they were looking at each other gloomily. After staring at each other for 2 seconds, Lu Baishui said in a low voice, "Take the wounded away." He was expressing his attitude. But Xiexing didn't seem to want this to end. He sneered, "Wait. Do you think the matter between us is over?" Lu Baishui sighed, "I advise you not to cause more trouble. When you arrive at Aquarius Bay safely, I will send you away. If you continue, I'm afraid you will lose your life. Do you still think I made up the East Sea Dragon King?" "It's just a sea beast," Xiexing said coldly. "Do you think you can scare me?" Lu Baishui was stunned. A wise man seeing what had just happened would have believed him. Xiexing looked like a smart person, but he was so stubborn at this moment. It was really puzzling. He didn't understand, but Li Yunxin did. Because he saw the dragon's head, Xiexing believed that this sea beast was related to dragons. Since it was related to dragons, it should be here to help him. And the facts proved that it had swallowed Great General Fu Bo. Lu Baishui believed that the appearance of the sea beast proved that he was familiar with the Dragon King of the East Sea. Xiexing also believed that the appearance of the sea beasts proved that he was indeed someone under Shinryu's protection. His organization was summoning him. With the 2 of them together, it would be a wonder if they would give up. Li Yunxin sighed, ready to stand up from the ground. At this moment the sea rippled for the 3rd time. This time it was far in front of the Taowu. A monstrous wave rose up, almost turning into a mountain. Not only did the wave under Great General Fu Bo's feet become inconspicuous splashes, even the 2 huge ships seemed to become small boats. The monstrous wave covered the sky and the earth. Even the seaweed and fish in the sea were swept up. Against the blue sky and the bright sun, it was as if there was a ferocious ghost dancing in the wave, extremely frightening. In just 2 breaths of time before anyone could react, this towering wall of water stood on the bow of the 2 ships. Moving forward with the ships but not crashing down. The reason for this was because there was a godly monarch standing on top of the wave. This godly monarch was more than 3 meters tall. He was not wearing armor, but he was still better than wearing armor, because his body was covered in black scales. Even his cheeks were covered, revealing only a pair of golden eyes. Above his golden eyes on his forehead was a pair of dark golden horns. These horns were thin but extremely long, reaching straight into the sky. It made this godly monarch seem extraordinary and disdainful. Now he stood on top of the wave. With a pair of bright eyes, he looked down at everyone on the ship and let out a thunderous voice. You still don't restrain yourself when you see me. Are you courting death? If the two of you keep arguing, I will bury you at the bottom of the sea. Behave yourselves. After saying this, the wave retreated and fiercely slammed down. Such a huge wave was enough to smash the two huge ships into pieces. However, this godly monarch seemed to only want to teach everyone a lesson, and had no intention of killing. Only the head of the wave came crashing up, but in an instant 2 of the 3 masts on the ship were broken, leaving only the main mast. The wave crashed down on the deck. The 2 huge ships shook violently as if they were about to capsize, and it took a full quarter of an hour for them to barely stabilize. But those sailors who were injured and unlucky were blown to God knows where. Presumably they had no chance of survival. The group of merchants around Li Yunxin was lucky. They were originally hiding in front of the ship. When they were blasted to the ship by the current, there was always something pulling them which saved their lives. The black-armored godly monarch on the wave came and went very fast, and he didn't even announce his name. However, the horrifying power he showed shocked Xianxia. Since leaving the valley, it was the first time he had met such a powerful demon. It was so powerful that it was beyond his expectation. Could such a power exist in this world? After the huge waves washed the huge ships, the mortals were busy checking the wounded and rescuing people. Even Lu Baishui had no time to be distracted. As for the cultivator, Xianxia looked serious. He circulated his spiritual essence and carefully checked the surroundings. Things seemed different from what he had imagined. The big demon on the wave sounded unfriendly. Didn't he come to help me? Where did he come from? Before the 2 demons showed up, he didn't notice them at all. The big demon just now gave him a terrible sense of oppression. He once again realized how dangerous this world was. Therefore, he didn't notice that little Immortal Li had disappeared. In fact, Li Yunxin was still on the ship. But he was in the sealed cabin at the bottom of the ship, which he had separated for the 9th young master. The cabin was originally dark, but now the talisman lit up the place. Through the wooden planks at the bottom of the ship, he could hear a dull and distant whining sound. It seemed that it wasn't seawater but strong wind outside the cabin. Occasionally he could hear the squeaking sound of the wood of the ship being squeezed. It seemed that this huge ship sailing on the sea was about to disintegrate at any time. Li Yunxin took a deep breath and looked at the demon standing in front of him. 9th young master, tell me, why did you do this? Now the 9th young master showed his appearance as a demon god. He was very tall, and the pair of golden horns on his head almost pierced the cabin roof. He walked back and forth in the cabin proudly, as if he was very satisfied with his majestic appearance. Then he said, "Why did I do this? Did I do anything wrong?" Li Yunxin sighed helplessly. "After all, I owed you in my previous life. It took me a lot of effort to catch a demon general. Why did you eat him?" The 9th young master smiled, but it was hard to see it in the demon god's body. "Didn't you and Chicken Spirit say along the way that we should observe secretly, disguise ourselves, and figure out the movements of the demons on the ship? Now that such a thing has jumped out, who on the ship dares to do anything? Where do you think you can find out? In my opinion, it's a bad thing that this little demon showed up." He shook his head proudly. "I just happened to swallow him. Hey, how dare you talk about the Dragon King of the East Sea? After swallowing this little demon, the ship will be safe again. Since you don't have to show up, you can take your time to observe." Li Yunxin was stunned. He didn't expect the 9th young master to think so much. He talked to Pheasant all the way and only regarded him as a person who did things. He just felt that the 9th young master was not interested in it, so it was better to let him play and not make trouble. At that time he could deceive him. If he met Lu Baishui or Xianxia, he would also be at a disadvantage if he was not careful. Unexpectedly, the demon heard it and paid attention to it. Now he did this thing. It could be said that he wanted to help. Although it was not a good help. In this case it was not good to blame him. Li Yunxin sighed again. "It turns out that you don't have to worry about it. Well, it's a good intention." He shook his head again. "But next time, 9th young master, you can try to keep him alive. Or don't. If you do, use him well. It's good to take him down and interrogate him. It's also good to get some inside information." The ninth young master stood in front of Li Yunxin with his hands clasped behind his back. He snorted and laughed. Do you think I'm a fool and can't think of it? Just watch. After saying this, he bent down and opened his mouth wide. With a wah sound, he spat out a person. His fiend god body was more than 10 feet tall. According to Li Yunxin's measurements, he was almost 4 meters tall. He was a colossus through and through. At this time, although he bent down, he was still on top of Li Yunxin's head. If he spat out again, if it weren't for Wei River Dragon King's quick reflexes that allowed him to dodge to the side, the messy things in his stomach mixed with seawater would have splashed all over his face. The one he spat out was the white-armored Great General Fu Bo previously. This demon was awe-inspiring, but now he was in a sorry state. The armor on his body was corroded and full of holes. Even his face was full of bloody holes. He looked like a rotten corpse. Beside him, there were some digested and undigested broken limbs and unknown bones. The demon general fell to the ground and felt dizzy. After a long time he slowly got up. He looked up and saw Li Yunxin, then the ninth young master. He immediately pointed at him, trembling. You. What kind of demon are you? You. The ninth young master didn't care about what he said. He spat a few more times on the demon's body and finished spitting out everything in his mouth. His body swayed and turned into a human wearing a white robe. I said I'm not a fool. I tasted this thing yesterday. The meat was cold. It was disgusting. If it wasn't to help you, I wouldn't even bother to swallow it. Ask me slowly. I'm leaving. Li Yunxin hurriedly said, Bah. The ninth young master ignored him. As if he was angry, he turned around and went out of the cabin. Chapter 609. Li Yunxin was stunned. He stared at the bottom of the cabin for a while and then smiled. The world was unpredictable. He met Lu Baishui in Whitewater Town. He thought that Lu Baishui was a man who was as open as a piece of white paper and intended to make friends with him like an ordinary mortal. But he didn't expect that Lu Baishui was hiding something from him. Although Lu Baishui was a real man who stuck to his Dao, and would rather die than betray Li Yunxin, but this kind of feeling was not so pure. Li Yunxin knew that he was not without fault. He was the one who hid his identity first. As he once said to Xianxia, it was difficult to get a good result if you start with deception. He didn't expect that the ninth young master whom he was secretly on guard against and whom he asked Shanji to make a good impression on all the way was really thinking about him and doing things for him. After all, there was a deep hatred between them. Who could say for sure what would happen in life and how people's hearts changed? So he felt a little warm in his heart. As the saying goes, lose in the east corner, gain in the mulberry. Perhaps he might try it again cautiously. As he thought of this, he heard General Fu Bo on the ground suddenly let out a low roar and pounced on him. This demon was swallowed, so it was extremely afraid of the ninth young master. Now that the ninth young master had escaped through the wall, only Li Yunxin was left. Li Yunxin was a super big demon in the mysterious realm. When his aura was restrained, even a mysterious realm cultivator would find it difficult to see through him, let alone a little demon general. This demon also lost some of its mind because of the pain and torture. It didn't think that a mortal could be so fearless, so it wanted to take him down and escape. This pounce was fierce. But in the eyes of Wei River Dragon King, it was no different from an ant waving its tentacles to show off. The fiendish demon that had leaped into the air was sent flying back with a boom, smashing into the wall of the cabin. Li Yunxin felt a little better at this time. This casual strike contained several kinds of magical powers. Not only did it send him flying back, but it also strengthened the wall with its demonic power. It was as if the demon had hit an iron wall. With a bang, it was flattened into a thin pancake on the wall. Then he hooked his index finger slightly. A misty green iron chain stretched out and locked the muddle-headed soul of the demon. At this moment he frowned slightly and waved his hand at the ground. A blue flame immediately ignited, burning all the dirty things on the ground. At the same time he took out a talisman from his bosom and shook it, releasing a cloud of black mist. With one hand he pointed at the demon general's soul a few times from afar. A strange talisman formation formed around him. This array formation was to temporarily ensure that the demon soul was clear-headed and not stupid. After finishing all this, he squinted at the black fog and said, Goddess Penglai, I'm going to interrogate this demon soul by torture. I've specially invited you to watch. Let's see what I can do if you don't tell me the truth. Goddess Penglai had been trapped in the talisman for more than 10 days, and it didn't feel good at all. She was only released now and her head was probably spinning and she didn't know where she was. But since the demon had some consciousness preserved by Li Yunxin, it immediately shrank back as soon as it saw Goddess Penglai. It was as if it was more afraid of her than it was of the 9th young master. Goddess Penglai turned around and saw the great General Fubo. She immediately screamed, "You! Ayaya! Hey! Kill him!" These two seemed to know each other. The demon's soul became even more afraid when it heard the demoness screams. He curled up on the ground and trembled as he kowtowed. "Please spare me, Your Highness. Please spare me. I was possessed for a moment. Please spare me, Your Highness. Please spare me." He kept kowtowing as he stared at the demoness and Li Yunxin. It seemed that he was not only afraid of Goddess Penglai, but also afraid of Li Yunxin's soul hunter strength, which could kill him with a wave of his hand. Or perhaps he thought that the demoness had found a helper. This scene made Li Yunxin frown slightly. He didn't expect this. Previously he met Mrs. Sanhua in the temple of Mrs. Sanhua. That demon seemed to be just a little demon. Although she had secrets, her words were incoherent, and she didn't seem like an important character. Now that he thought about it, she was at most a detail or a clue. He met Goddess Penglai, again in Whitewater Town. She seemed to have something to do with Mrs. Sanhua. It was almost the same style. She claimed to be an immortal from Mount Penglai, but Li Yunxin didn't take it seriously. He thought that she must have made up an identity for other purposes. Now that she was released, he wanted her to see how he would interrogate this great General Fubo, and let her think about whether she could make up her story. He didn't expect that the scene today, what she said seemed to be true. So he was a little stunned, pointed at the great General Fubo and shouted in a low voice, "Speak! Who is she?" Without thinking, the demon general kept kowtowing and immediately said, "She is the Lord of Penglai, the righteous god of Mount Penglai in the East Sea. She has been guarding the Spirit Mountain for thousands of years. Goddess Penglai, I was bewitched. She was really a Goddess Penglai." Li Yunxin frowned again. "Go on. What evil things have you done?" The demon general hurriedly said, "I shouldn't have been bewitched by the traitor. I had no choice. Goddess couldn't protect us at that time, and the traitor claimed to be the Dragon King of the East Sea." Next he rambled on about his difficulties and begged for forgiveness. It was all cliché. But just based on these 2 sentences, if he was telling the truth, it all corroborated with what the demoness had said these days. She used to be the righteous god in Mount Penglai. Later, for some reason, her monster power gradually declined, and she was betrayed by the Dragon King of the East Sea. The demon general said that Goddess Penglai had been in charge of Mount Penglai for thousands of years. Lu Baishui said that the name of the Dragon King of the East Sea had been passed down among the people for thousands of years. This meant that Goddess Penglai was born 2,000 years ago, which also confirmed what the demoness had said to Li Yunxin before. Li Yunxin also asked her if she remembered what her real body was and who sealed her in Mount Penglai. But she couldn't remember anything. This was also similar to Mrs. Sanhua. The Mrs. Sanhua temple in the wild forest seemed to have been destroyed for a long time. But now when he recalled its original appearance, he realized that the temple used to cover a large area. The ruins were surrounded by towering trees. Only the area around the temple was covered in grass. There were no trees. It showed that the foundation was very good when it was built. At least it was not by mortal means. Otherwise, it couldn't have been preserved for so long. He had always been suspicious about the origin of the 3 flowers. Therefore he had checked the local records, trying to find information about the Mrs. Sanhua temple. But he found nothing. It was not surprising that he found it. It would be strange if he couldn't find it. Nowadays people attached great importance to things like sacrificing gods and monsters. The Dragon King Temple of Lu Gongzan in the city of Wei even had the important responsibility of recording important things like sacrificing to the Rain Valley. If the Mrs. Sanhua Temple was full of incense at that time, how could there be no information left? It could only be erased deliberately. In the Mrs. Sanhua Temple, the 3 flowers were sculpted in the statue by the method of painting Taoism. The method of painting Taoism appeared about 2,000 years ago. This goddess Penglai was also born 2,000 years ago, and declined 1,000 years ago. 2,000 years and 1,000 years were extremely sensitive time points. Li Yunxin felt that he was getting closer and closer to some truth. Maybe some of the things he had mastered now were not thought of by the people behind the scenes. He shouted again, interrupting the demon general's long-winded words. Now I ask you again. Have you ever seen a woman named Shangguanyu? Goddess Penglai interrupted and screamed, Hey! Of course. Didn't I tell you? On the way, she told Li Yunxin that when Shangguanyu and her party sailed near Mount Penglai, there was a sudden storm. The storm was so strong that it seemed that it would not stop until the ship was overturned. Fortunately, Shangguanyu was not an ordinary person. She managed to save the ship with her supernatural power, but in the end they still crashed into the goddess Penglai temple in Mount Penglai. Hearing this, Li Yunxin felt that this female demon was talking nonsense. How could such a big ship crash into a temple? But he didn't point it out. She also said that she stayed in her palace for a long time and asked many questions. Later she learned about the rebel, and went to find the rebel, the Dragon King of the East Sea mentioned by Lu Baishui. After that, Goddess Penglai possessed Li Si and escaped from Mount Penglai. Her explanation for this was, Shangguanyu had gone to look for that traitor, so she had no choice but to expose her hiding place. Finally she found a way to leave Mount Penglai. Of course she had to run far away. Li Yunxin ignored her. He only said to the demon general, I'm asking you. The demon general didn't dare to hesitate. He looked even more spineless and said in a trembling voice, Yes, yes, yes. I don't know if her name is you. Last year there was indeed a woman who made trouble for the king. Speaking of this, he stole a glance at Li Yunxin. Seeing Li Yunxin's dark face, he asked, Is that woman dead? The demon general froze as if he was thinking about something. He said cautiously, Goddess, is this a human being? What? How does he look like a human being? Idiot. Goddess Penglai was furious. Do you think I'll be caught? Bah, bah, bah. The demon general did not fawn over anyone, and his heart was about to break from fear. He kowtowed again. Yes, yes, yes. Reporting to this monster king that woman was looking for my Da, that traitor, to bring bad luck to her, so they fought. In the end she was defeated and imprisoned by that traitor. She is still imprisoned to this day. Li Yunxin fell silent with a gloomy face. The demon general didn't know if he had said something wrong. He looked at Goddess Penglai, but she ignored him. After a moment of silence he walked to the demon's soul, stretched out a finger and touched his forehead. The demon general didn't know what Li Yunxin was going to do, and Goddess Penglai didn't seem to know either. I'm here to see if you're telling the truth. Li Yunxin said in a gloomy tone, You should blame yourself for playing these tricks in front of me at this moment. Then he crooked his finger. The demon general's soul seemed to be suddenly scattered and turned into many clouds of hazy mist, which looked like Goddess Penglai now. Li Yunxin raised his hand and grabbed, taking all the mist into his palm. In his left hand the book of life and death given to him by Yanjun appeared. Then he slapped the mist in his palm onto it. Inside the opened book, densely packed words immediately appeared. The demon general had just asked Li Yunxin if he was a human or a demon and observed his expression. Obviously he wanted to figure out his identity before thinking about what to say. He was afraid that if he said something wrong and angered this big demon king, he would lose his soul as well. In the end he was too smart for his own good. Li Yunxin wanted to hear the truth, not happy words. Since he could see that this demon wanted to say what he wanted, he might as well break the demon's soul and search his memory carefully. The last part was for the banshee to hear. He turned around. And slowly flipped through the booklet page by page. From time to time he raised his head and looked at Goddess Penglai meaningfully and gloomily. After flipping through 5 or 6 pages, Goddess Penglai suddenly shrunk into a small cloud of black mist and screamed in a shrill voice. But I didn't lie. But why are you looking at me? But you scared me. Don't look at me. Li Yunxin sneered. Goddess Penglai didn't lie. But she didn't tell the whole truth. From the demon general's memory, the so-called Mount Penglai was indeed related to the Dragon Island. Or, it was the gateway to the Dragon Island. People said that there were 4 immortal mountains on the sea. Dragon Island, Penglai, Yingzhou and Fenghu. These 4 mountains did exist. But their whereabouts were not fixed. Many people claimed that they saw immortal mountains and immortals. But even the descriptions of the immortal mountains in the same sea area were different. Some people said that they remembered the exact location of the Immortal Mountains, but later generations couldn't find them. Because the 4 mountains were floating on the sea. In the demon general's memory, this goddess Penglai was one of the demon kings that Lord Shinryu personally conferred on Mount Penglai 2,000 years ago to guard the gateway to the Dragon Island. But this memory came from a rumor. General Fubo's true body was a great white shark. He was only at the peak of the transcendent realm about 1,200 years ago. Goddess Penglai was conferred, happened before he was born. About 1,000 years ago, Goddess Penglai's demonic power suddenly weakened. She fell from the profound realm to the emptiness realm. No one knew the reason. But after all, she was conferred by Lord Shinryu. For a while no one dared to rebel. Later, a demon general under Goddess Penglai's command volunteered to go to the Dragon Island to see if something had happened to the true dragon and caused the current situation. Of course, the female demon didn't allow it. Thus, the demon general sneaked away. 3 years had passed since he left. After 3 years, everyone thought that the demon general was dead. But he came back. His cultivation had improved and he had reached the profound realm. He said that he had found out the reason for his trip to the Dragon Island. It was because of Goddess Penglai's disrespect to the true dragon that the Divine Lord was so furious that he seized her cultivation base. Now she separated her dragon power and sealed it in him. She conferred him the title of Dragon King of the East Sea, and gave him control over Mount Penglai and the East Sea. She also conferred the other 8 dragon kings to manage Yingzhou Fenghu and the vast waters around Midland. Therefore it became a rebellion according to Goddess Penglai. Chapter 6:10. After the East Sea Dragon King took over the throne, he became more magnanimous. He didn't purge anyone, but he said that he would let bygones be bygones. This great General Fubo was originally a little fiendish demon that didn't make the cut. Because he stood on the right side at the beginning, he got the title of Following the Dragon, and was asked to patrol the East Sea every day. As for Shangguanyu, he didn't see it with his own eyes, but he heard it from the demon on Mount Penglai. But it was about 80 to 90% accurate. There shouldn't be any lies in this demon general's memory. If there was something he didn't know, it was just something he didn't know. For example, Shinryu made this goddess Penglai the demon immortal guarding the mountain. In that case, what exactly was she? Nowadays, Li Yunxin was experienced and knowledgeable. He had seen birds and beasts that had attained the Tao. He had also seen ghost cultivators. It wasn't like there weren't any stools or carrying pole spirits, and he himself was a dragon child. But he had never seen Mrs. Sanhua and Goddess Penglai. When he was with Sanhua, he thought it was because she was seriously injured and lost her mind, so she was confused. But after seeing Sanhua on Mount Yunshan, and Goddess Penglai here, he knew this kind of thing. Although they looked stupid, he understood it. Looking at the memory of this Supreme General Fubo, they were originally like this. They didn't have any trauma. They always looked crazy. What is it? Li Yunxin realized this was a key point. He suspected Mrs. Sanhua before, but he wasn't sure. Now there was Goddess Penglai in front of him. If he could get the inside story from her, maybe the curtain that had been covering him was lifted halfway. Without a doubt, Mrs. Sanhua was sent to him. The mastermind behind the scenes was most likely Mu Nanju, to protect him and to find out if he was the real crown prince Xianxia. Then this Goddess Penglai. What is her background? Which side is she on? Thinking of this, he slowly closed the book. He looked up at the female demon. The cabin was illuminated by talismans. However, it was not a bright light. Instead, it was a faint yellow flame that hung in the air. Now that he had a terrifying thought in his mind, his eyes were filled with undisguised malice. Thus, when his face was illuminated by the yellow flames, it became even more uncertain, as though he was an evil spirit. So you used to be a profound realm demon. I apologize for my rudeness. Li Yunxin looked at her maliciously as he slowly paced back and forth. This demon general's head is filled with a lot of things. But there are some things. The more he knew, the more curious he became. For example, what exactly are you? And why did the Shinryu confer you the title in the first place? If I ask you, will you answer me honestly? At this point, he had slowly walked to the front of Goddess Penglai. He had been looking through the memory of the demon general and the female monster at the same time, which scared her so much that she curled up into a ball and hid in the corner of the cabin. Now that Li Yunxin was walking in front of her, The demoness seemed to know that something was wrong. After all, she used to be a profound realm expert. After witnessing Li Yunxin's means, she immediately realized that this guy was incredible. He was at least a profound realm expert. With her current situation, what could she do when such a super demon had a bad thought? Therefore she screamed and rose to the corner of the cabin roof. I don't know. I don't know either. But where could she hide? With a gloomy smile on his face, Li Yunxin suddenly stretched his neck like a noodle. He put his face in front of the female monster and stared at her. You said you don't know, and I don't know whether what you said is true or not. I have to break you up and see for myself. The female monster looked really scared. She immediately turned into a cloud of mist and ran around the cabin crazily, screaming. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know either. I don't know how to tell you either. You might as well just kill me. No. Don't kill me, don't kill me. I won't know even if you kill me. Li Yunxin looked at her running around crazily for a while, then suddenly retracted his neck and shouted, How many people like you are around the East Sea? The female monster shouted, I don't know. I only know that I'm alone. At this point, as if she had grasped a life-saving straw, her body suddenly stopped. I know how to get to the Dragon Island. From Mount Penglai, I know how to get there. The Dragon King of the East Sea also knows. Li Yunxin sneered and said, When I catch him, I will interrogate him slowly. Ba. The female monster spun in the air. That's because the Shinryu opened the sea ban. The Shinryu wants to let people in so he can get in. I know how to sneak in. Sneak in. Do you want to sneak in? No one knows. Li Yunxin suddenly stopped laughing, as if the female monster's words had triggered something in his mind. He thought for a while, then said, Why didn't you say so earlier? The female monster looked like she was about to cry. A faint black fog was emitted from her body. I just remembered. Sealing me on the Dragon Island is to suppress something. Suppress something. I sneak in from there. Li Yunxin was silent for 2 breaths. Then he smiled and squinted at her. Actually, you weren't the only one in the East Sea. You guarded Mount Penglai. There were 2 others similar to you. One guarded Mount Ingzhou and the other guarded Mount Fenghu. Because the 3 mountains never appeared at the same time, this General Fubo didn't know, right? You didn't say anything about this. The female monster's body suddenly stopped. As if she was extremely surprised, she screamed, How did you know? Li Yunxin tilted his head and stared at her for a while, then said, I guessed. But it seems that I guessed right. You guys are indeed this kind of things. So that's what happened. He said this half to himself, then smiled sinisterly. Oh, I won't kill you. I'm just kidding. How could I really kill you? Even if I want to die, it's not the right time yet. The black fog that the female monster turned into trembled again, as if she didn't understand that Li Yunxin was still questioning her, but now she seemed to have understood something. So she didn't want to scatter her soul. As if he knew more than her now. As if she had some kind of speculation before. But now, because of 1 or 2 points in her words, she was suddenly enlightened. That was all she could think of. Li Yunxin suddenly waved his big sleeve, and the talisman collected Goddess Penglai again. It was already noon when the merchants ran to the deck. Many things happened later, and it was already afternoon. When Li Yunxin finished dealing with the demon general and the female monster and got out of the cabin, it was already dark. The wounded were sent for treatment, but it was still unknown whether they could survive. Xiaxing went back to his cabin alone and closed the door. At this time he should be safe. The immortal lord who appeared on the waves told them not to cause any more trouble. Xiaxing should think that the immortal lord was thinking about him. This meant that the ship had reached the protection of the dragons. He could find the organization soon. Lu Baishui stayed on the deck to comfort the anxious people. He walked from the bow to the stern, directing the sailors to repair the masts and the ship buildings damaged by the waves. At this time, the 2 huge ships on the sea were brightly lit. People could be seen everywhere like a small construction site. But when Li Yunxin appeared behind Lu Baishui, it was already late at night. The sea breeze blew. The repair work came to an end. There was no one on the deck except for those on night duty. And Lu Baishui was eating in a sheltered place next to the ship building. He was eating a piece of bread with some pickled vegetables. It meant that he was sharing weal and woe with others. But there was no one around him. He leaned against the shadow and couldn't see anyone. Li Yunxin stood behind him for a while. Lu Baishui slowly swallowed the food and put down the hand holding the bread. Even so, he stood for a while and turned around. He said calmly, "Where did you go, Brother Li?" At this time there was still a blood stain on his face. The bleeding had stopped, but the wound was swollen, making him look a little strange. To deal with some private matters. Li Yunxin glanced at the bread in his hand and then at his wound. "So you are Lu Fei. You know that the Dragon King of the East Sea does exist and even had some contact with him." Lu Baishui nodded and said, "I hid it from Brother Li. But I have my difficulties." "I want to hear it." Lu Baishui sighed and shook his head. He looked around and found a place to sit down. "I saw that you didn't have any other thoughts. I just felt that we were on the same wavelength. Then you asked me, is she your Ling Xi? Li Yunxin was silent for a while and said stiffly, "Yes. I didn't have any suspicions about your Ling Xi. Till later. I heard about what happened in the governor's mansion." Lu Baishui smiled bitterly. "I heard that there was a young cultivator in the governor's mansion. I thought it was Brother Li, so I hid it from you. I didn't expect it to be you." Li Yunxin nodded slowly. "What about you and the Dragon King of the East Sea?" "I'm just a person." Lu Baishui touched the wound on his nose gently. "It's just that the Dragon King of the East Sea is us. There are many people like me who work for the Dragon King of the East Sea. It's an exaggeration to say that we work for him. We just collect some rare treasures on the road and offer them to him. He guarantees good weather for people like us who make a living on the sea." "Brother Li. But who are you?" "The one on the wave." Li Yunxin nodded. "I know. But it's better that you don't know about me." He was silent for a while and thought for a while. "Since you are loyal, I will guarantee your safety." "Since you are loyal, is it true that you are hiding in Aquarius Bay?" Lu Baishui realized that Li Yunxin's tone had changed. He was not the gentle Li Yunxin from before. Instead, he became cold and a little chilly. Like a knife. Maybe this was the real him. He shook his head gently again. "Aquarius Bay is just a stop. In fact, it's in..." Li Yunxin raised her hand and interrupted him. "Brother Lu. Brother Lu, I'm not here to find out where you are. I just want to tell you to leave the East Sea as soon as possible. Something big may happen here in a few days. If you leave too late, I'm afraid someone will die." Lu Baishui was stunned and wanted to frown. But as soon as he frowned, he hissed. The wound caused by Xiaxing's lightsaber was still there. It was okay to be expressionless, but if he spoke too much, it would hurt. "Brother Li, can you tell me in detail?" He had to keep a straight face. "Leave the East Sea." "How far away?" "Leave the East Sea, that is, go back to land." Li Yunxin looked at him. "There may be a war in the East Sea." "War? Who? With whom?" Li Yunxin stared at Lu Baishui for a while and smiled. "The dragon that jumped out of the sea during the day is my cousin. If you want to talk about a war, it's with the Dragon King of the East Sea." Lu Baishui suddenly opened his eyes wide and took a step back. "Brother Li, the person I'm looking for is with the Dragon King of the East Sea. Of course, I'm going to find trouble with him." Li Yunxin said in a low voice. "Brother Lu, take care of yourself." After saying this, he turned around and disappeared in the air. Lu Baishui still stood there, stunned and speechless. Although he had many ideas, he still couldn't accept the fact that Li Yunxin, who looked like a human being, was a demon. And if he didn't lie, he was a big demon who thought he could compete with the Dragon King of the East Sea. However, such an identity could not be matched with the Li Yunxin that he had seen, no matter how he looked at it. He stood in the shadow in a daze, listening to the sea breeze blowing in his ears. After standing like this for a long time, he heard something else, footsteps. The brothers on duty were also walking. But these were obviously not the footsteps of his people. The person walking should be good at martial arts and could barely be regarded as a second-rate master. Now he was walking cautiously in front and behind him. There must be something unspeakable about someone walking like this. It was ridiculous. Just a moment ago he was thinking about the East Sea, the Dragon King of the East Sea, and Brother Li, who might be a big demon. But now, the footsteps of ordinary people, which were insignificant to those existences, startled him again. Lu Baishui felt that his brain was a bit numb. Too many things had happened on this ship that were beyond common sense. Now all of them came back to him. He felt that his feeling before he went out to sea was correct. There was a big whirlpool. And he was falling deeper and deeper into this whirlpool. He sighed inwardly and told himself to move forward cautiously to look at the man. The ship was very long and so was the ship's building. Although it was divided into 3 floors, each floor was not a whole space, but was divided into small rooms like a house on land. He was now near the bow of the ship, looking at the belly of the ship, and saw a woman. It was very dark on the deck. He couldn't see her face clearly. But there was only one woman on this ship, Pan He. Her footsteps were light and her movements were agile. She raised her hand to touch the railing and silently jumped to the 2nd floor. Lu Baishui sighed in his heart for the umpteenth time. It seemed that something was going to happen again. Now, after seeing what happened during the day and hearing what Li Yunxin said, even a man like him felt powerless in his heart. This was not a matter of being depressed and dispirited, but knowing that there were some things that he really couldn't do. For example, if the demons really fought on the sea, what could he do? This trip to the sea was to do his own things and also to solve some problems. He didn't expect that now. He was the incidental thing in other people's eyes. His brother Li and Xiaxing seemed to be out of his control. Now this woman had jumped out. He had a hunch that the things that happened to this woman after her death might not be something that he could control. But there were hundreds of his brothers on the ship. If he didn't bite the bullet and go to sea, who would? Lu Baishui shook his head and his figure also rose in the night, going to the 2nd floor. Chapter 6:11. Now there was only one person living on the 2nd floor. Xiaxing. At the same time that Lu Baishui noticed Pan He's movement, Li Yunxin also noticed it. He was now standing on the top of the main mast that hadn't been broken. The huge ship became smaller under him and the open sails swelled in the sea breeze. As far as his eyes could see, he could only see the boundless sea. The sea was sparkling under the moonlight, as if the ship was sailing on the back of a giant dragon. Pan He's every move was in his perception. Even if this woman was a martial arts master compared to mortals, her voice was still too loud in the perception of a mysterious realm monster. Her feet stepped on the wooden planks, her palms touched the wall, and she gently exhaled. All these were heard by Li Yunxin, and he made precise movements. He asked Pheasant to erase Pan He's memory of that night, but he didn't get rid of her, because he wanted to let her doubt ferment in her heart. This woman was not smart in his eyes, but she was not stupid among mortals. A Freemason in charge of the Donghai nation suddenly lost her memory on the ship, and her wrist was broken. She should know that someone had done something to her. Someone did something to her but didn't kill her and just didn't let her remember. Maybe this person was not completely hostile. It was possible that they were on the same side in some ways. It was just that she didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and provoked him, so he attacked her. So this not completely hostile person, in Pan He's opinion, who could it be? It could only be the Donghai nation's grand manager of Nanmuju. This time, Li Yunxin came to the sea to use these 2 ships as isolation cabins. If he could get rid of the last tail of Nanmuju and the Freemasonry, he would really disappear from their control. However, he found the Freemasonry but not the Nanmuju. He was a mysterious realm monster and he was powerful but not omnipotent. Since he couldn't find them, the Freemasonry, who had been dealing with Nanmuju for hundreds of years, should be able to do it better than him. He spared Pan He's life and only erased the memory of that night because of this. He asked her to find the grand manager for him. Unexpectedly, her gun was useless. He had been paranoid for a few days, but he still couldn't get anything done. It seemed that either the shopkeeper was not on the ship or he had hidden himself too well. Li Yunxin sighed. These people from the new Freemasonry were really useless. Only Shanji, the 9th young master, and Lu Baishui knew his real identity. Xiaxing knew that there were people stronger than him in the sea, but he didn't seem to think that they were enemies. The 9th young master had made a smart move by appearing on the waves during the day, so that the people on the ship would be on their guard and not cause any more trouble, but it did not frighten them. Xiaxing was meditating in the cabin just like he did a few days ago. Li Yunxin closed his eyes and carefully observed. Sometimes, like now, when he was close to Xiaxing and there were not many people around, he could sense the qi activity that Xiaxing exuded when he was cultivating. Just by looking at one spot, one would be able to tell the whole picture. Thus, one could estimate Xiaxing's cultivation progress and speed. The cultivation speed of this true prince could be said to be 1,000 miles a day. He seemed to have a treasure in his hand. The spiritual qi on the treasure was not worth mentioning for Li Yunxin's realm, but it was useful for Xiaxing's cultivation. Tonight his qi activity was a little unstable. Li Yunxin seemed to have reached a critical juncture in his cultivation, and even showed signs of qigong deviation occasionally. But the golden light method that Xiaxing cultivated was given by him. From a certain point of view, Li Yunxin's cultivation foundation, especially for some basic things, was excellent. He had also glanced at the golden light technique. The contents were too shallow for him, so he was well aware of what might happen when he cultivated it. Because of this, he felt it was a little strange. Xiaxing should not show signs of qigong deviation at this juncture. The other strange thing was Pan He. The smell of this woman tonight was a little special. Li Yunxin didn't look at her. Instead, he was smelling and listening. So tonight she smelled more fragrant than usual. He stood on the top of the mast, frowned, and thought for a while. Suddenly he understood. So he drew a circle in the void in front of him, and the scene he wanted to see appeared in the circle. This method, called round light mirror, was convenient, but it had to be used with caution. If Xiaxing's breath was not chaotic tonight, it was very likely that he would be found out. Then he saw, Xiaxing was wearing only his underclothes, sitting cross-legged in the cabin. His eyes were closed as if he had reached a bottleneck in his cultivation. At this time, Pan He had walked to the door of Xiaxing's room. Lu Baishui was watching from the other side of the second floor, trying to figure out what Pan He was going to do. But he was just a mortal after all and could only see the vague appearance. Pan He stopped in front of the door and made a strange move. She combed her hair. Normally she should have been vigilant when she was lurking here at night. But now she combed her hair as if she was going to see her lover. Then the woman tugged at her collar again. She opened her collar a little, revealing her chest. Pan He was bought by Wu Jiasong. In this era she was called a beautiful middle-aged woman, but in the era of Li Yunxin she was actually only a beautiful 24 or 25 years old woman. She had a fair complexion, and as she pulled, her snow-white breasts looked a little soul-stirring under the moonlight. Li Yunxin snorted with interest. He saw Pan He reach out her hand and do something on the door, and it opened. As soon as the door opened, she immediately dashed in and closed the door. Such a sound could not be hidden from Xiaxing's ears. He immediately opened his eyes on the bed, and stared at the woman at the door with bright eyes. The cabin he was in was quite large, and Pan He was more than 10 steps away from him. There were only 3 candles in the cabin, and the light from them was limited. Therefore, even with Xiaxing's current cultivation, he could only see the appearance of the woman. He seemed to be prepared for this. He gloomily stared at Pan He for 2 breaths and said in a low voice, "Who are you?" Li Yunxin noticed that he began to circulate his qi. Spiritual energy filled his body, ready to attack at any time. But Pan He laughed lightly. It was the kind of laughter that a woman would make intentionally, and it was completely different from normal laughter. Even her voice became sweet. "I'm the incense holder. I'm here to deliver incense to Daoist priest." The last 2 words were enunciated lightly and dragged out. Her tone was tactful and full of provocation. It was as if the atmosphere in the room had suddenly become too sweet. As she spoke, she stared at Xiaxing and slowly walked towards him. When she took the first step, Xiaxing didn't say anything and didn't stop her. It was as if he wanted to see what she was going to do. When she took the second step, Pan He pulled open her belt. The soft silk belt slid down and fell on her outstretched thighs. And because the belt was pulled open, her snow-white and round thighs were faintly visible. She wasn't wearing underwear. The unique fragrance of a woman's body spread in the room. Xiaxing slightly frowned but still didn't say anything. So Pan He took the third step. The silk belt on her thighs slid down, and so did her outer robe. So a delicate female body with only a light pink doo-doo was exposed in the room. It was winter, and although the temperature on the sea was getting warmer, people still wore quite a lot of clothes. In this era, there was no 3-dimensional tailoring, so the graceful figure of a woman was hidden under the loose clothes. Therefore, when she took off her outer robe and revealed her snow-white slender legs, smooth collarbones and round and towering breasts, she finally understood why Wu Jiasong had bought her in the first place. The body hidden under her clothes was rare and wonderful in this era. So she took another 3 steps. Pan He walked to the candlestick on the table. Xiaxing finally saw her face clearly. His eyebrows gradually relaxed and he squinted his eyes and finally said the second sentence, "What do you want?" Pan He stopped in her tracks and gently covered her chest with her bandaged hand. Her doo-doo was very small and thin. Because of the cold, a slight bulge could be seen. At this time, when she covered it with her hand, it had a different effect. She pressed the doo-doo down a little and her chest was even more aroused. And her flat snow-white lower abdomen was also exposed, reflecting the enchanting undulations in the candlelight. This kind of provocative posture made her voice even more seductive. Daoist priest, do you want me after asking clearly or do you want me, then ask? Xiaxing's eyes narrowed even more. He stared at Pan He for about 3 or 4 seconds and then said, take it off. His voice was a little hoarse. Pan He put her hand down. And your body. Pan He smiled and pulled the back of her neck with her left hand. The last piece of clothing on her seductive body fell to the ground, completely exposing her beautiful body in front of Xiaxing. Li Yunxing laughed. Xiaxing's throat moved. After 2 breaths, he suddenly raised his hands, and from his sleeves scattered 6 or 7 golden talismans. They fell on the ground, the ceiling and the wall, protecting the room. Then he shouted in a low voice, come here. At this time his voice was full of desire, even slightly trembling. Pan He twisted her waist and slowly walked over, but Xiaxing had already waved his hand again. This snow-white body was pulled into his arms by an invisible force. The cultivator turned into a fierce beast in an instant, and his clothes were also taken off. 2 fiery bodies immediately tangled together. Pan He first let out a coquettish exclamation, and then she let out an uncontrollable moan. Then there was the sound of continuous panting. The huge ship was still moving in the night wind. Lu Baishui didn't know what happened in the cabin. Xiaxing's talismans isolated the cabin, and mortals couldn't hear any sound. But Li Yunxing was still standing on the top of the mast, watching intently. After about a dozen breaths of time, Pan He was pressed onto the bed and the first battle quickly ended. However, Xiaxing was full of fighting spirit and soon he started the second round. This time it took a little longer, about 10 breaths. Then he started the third round without stopping. Pan He was good in bed and she was flirtatious and flirtatious. Xiaxing was also a cultivator and he was full of energy. The first 2 times he held it in for a long time and after a hasty end he finally got into the mood. This time it took nearly an hour. When it came to the 4th round, Pan He finally began to beg for mercy. However, begging for mercy was also like provocation. It made Xiaxing, who had been silent all this while and only knew how to work hard, collide even more fiercely. Li Yunxing narrowed his eyes, and he knew why Xiaxing's previous cultivation went wrong. 2 mortals. One was strong and the other was weak. Generally speaking, the stronger one had more desire in some aspects than the weaker one, let alone cultivators. Cultivation, the essence, qi and spirit. The true fire of Yuanyang grew stronger with the health of the essence, qi and spirit. Without good guidance it would be difficult to suppress. At least before Li Yunxing turned 14, Li Chunfeng and Shangguanyu had been guiding him in cultivation. Unknowingly they had helped him resolve this difficulty and prevented him from burning like Xiaxing. It was a pity that Xiaxing started to cultivate the golden light method that Li Yunxing gave him. However, as mentioned earlier, the path of cultivation was very dangerous. It was not like the secular martial arts he learned in the grotto. Without guidance he ended up like this. But this was only part of the reason. The other part, this was probably a fact that every transmigrator couldn't avoid. Coming to a world with the mentality of a game and having martial arts that could override all living beings. If that person was originally interested in certain aspects and had a strong need for it. He had been cooped up in the deep mountains for more than 10 years. Now, on this relatively safe sea he encountered an advantage that came knocking on his door, and he thought that in this world he had the absolute ability to ensure his own safety and control the situation. Naturally he didn't care. He would eat the meat first. Therefore, when the 5th round of fierce attacks began, Pan He's body was really limp, and she really didn't have the strength to speak anymore. She really closed her eyes in pain and she wanted to struggle to push Xiaxing away, but she couldn't use any strength at all. Li Yunxing sneered coldly. When this woman found him before he thought that she only had petty tricks. Now it seemed, she really only had petty tricks. She should have thought of some of the things that Li Yunxing thought of. Perhaps because of her observation of Xiaxing these days, she followed some clues and found out about his preferences and desires. Therefore this time she planned to use a direct and forceful method to obtain a channel for deep communication. Unexpectedly she overestimated her own worth. Xiaxing was a native of this world. But he was a transmigrator. Just like when Li Yunxing came into this world he didn't completely treat the people of this world as human. He was afraid that this woman would be in danger tonight. Just when Li Yunxin was thinking whether or not to interrupt Xiaxing's good deed that had lasted for nearly 4 hours, he found another person. That person had run to the deck from the lower cabin, and now without saying a word he went straight to the second floor of the ship. His footsteps were a little heavy and he seemed to be in a bad mood. Li Yunxin squinted his eyes and looked. It was Wu Jiasong. He laughed and temporarily gave up on the idea of making a move. He found that Wu Jiasong had walked to the second floor, to the door of Xiaxing's cabin. After a slight hesitation he slowly moved closer and put his ear on the door to listen. Naturally he couldn't hear anything. After being stunned for a while he turned around. But he didn't leave. With his hands in his sleeves he sat against the wall beside the door. It seemed that he wanted to wait. Chapter 6:12. At this time Lu Baishui was waiting. Unexpectedly his patience was also very good. Or maybe he couldn't fall asleep anyway. He sat in the corner of the second floor with his eyes half closed. For as long as 4 hours, whenever a member of the crew on night duty was seen, a low whistle like the sound of the wind was used to signal them to retreat. Thus when Xiaxing's 5th round of fierce attacks ended and Pan He completely fainted, it had been almost 4 hours. In the cabin Xiaxing climbed up from the soft body. Half of the bed had collapsed. He was an emptiness realm expert and had a strong body so he didn't care. However, Pan He's back was pressed against the broken stubble of the bed. Although there was a blanket as a barrier, it was still penetrated by the broken stubble in the waves of violent collisions. As a result, the bedding under her was now a patch of blood red. Presumably her back was also badly mutilated. Xiaxing glanced at Pan He's naked and twisted body. He walked to the table in the room, picked up a pot of herbal tea and drank it in one gulp. After burping, he threw the teapot away and picked up the satin belt that Pan He hung on the table to wipe his hands. Then he turned around and said, "Tell me, what do you want?" Right now, Pan He was in a delicate situation between being on the verge of death and being on the brink of death. She could feel that her life was slowly slipping away, but she was still conscious enough to hear Xiaxing's words. Therefore she realized one thing. This person didn't just vent on her. He asked her, "What do you want?" because he wanted her to be on the verge of death. She had no doubt that if her answer didn't satisfy him, she would die in such an undignified way. Although she knew that this would be dangerous, she still had a strange feeling. She vaguely felt that she had failed somewhere before. She always failed. This vague thought gave her a strong feeling of unwillingness. But when was the last time? Her gaze became a little unfocused. However, Xiaxing's snort pulled her back to reality. "Don't talk. Are you really here to die?" She slowly squeezed out a weak voice. "Daoist. Priest. You must be joking. Of course it's..." At this point he suddenly coughed as if he was coughing up blood. But when he raised his head he choked on the blood. Blood spurted out from his mouth and his face turned green. He used all his strength to raise his hand and stared at Xiaxing with wide eyes. Xiaxing stared at her coldly for 2 or 3 breaths. His eyes roamed over her body again as if he was wondering if this body was still suitable for him to use. After pondering for a moment, Zhou Xian sneered coldly and flipped his hand. Pan He's body flipped over and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He coughed violently a few times before he could speak again. Thank you, Daoist priest." As he said this, he tried his best to smile. Unfortunately, his mouth was full of blood, so his smile was not pleasant. Xiaxing looked at her and sneered, "You really are a bitch." After saying this, he summoned his inner clothes and slowly put them on. As he tied the belt, he sneered, "But I like it. I'll spare your life. Take your time." With that, he walked to the half-collapsed bed. He stretched his hand to the side of the bed and took out a green pill from his Taoist robe. He turned around, pried open Pan He's mouth and stuffed the pill inside. But this pill was as big as a pigeon's egg. How could Pan He swallow it at this moment? Moreover, her throat was injured earlier, so her face immediately showed a painful expression. Li Yunxin had been watching from the beginning to the end. At this time he knew what this pill was. All cultivators had to dabble in alchemy. Although he was not very good at it in front of Xiaxing, he should be a decent student. He knew that this green pill was called the elemental brew pill. It was used as a catalyst to refine more advanced pills. It was considered a semi-finished product, a prototype. Ordinary cultivators didn't care about it. They didn't even want to eat it. This Xiaxing should have gotten it from the governor's office. But he carried it with him, it was too shabby. He grew up under the attention of Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu for more than 10 years. He didn't think there was anything special about it. But after seeing Xiaxing these days, seeing such a person who really had no one to watch over him and start cultivating from nothing, he realized how difficult it was and how dangerous it was. When he was young, he would occasionally play with it like a marble. But in Xiaxing's hands it became a treasure. Xiaxing stuffed the treasure into Pan He's mouth, then pulled her messy hair and sat her up. He put a palm on her shoulder and said coldly, "I stuffed a pill in your mouth. You mortals can't bear this kind of immortal medicine. If you really swallow it, you'll either die from bloating or die from spiritual power. You need me to circulate my energy to help you digest it. Only then will you be able to bear it and keep your life. It will also heal your injuries. Now I ask you one question and you answer one." Xiaxing said coldly, "If you tell half a lie, I'll hang you on the mast like this." Pan He's mouth was stuffed so she could only make muffled sounds in response. So Xiaxing thought for 3 breaths and asked the first question, "Are you a member of the Freemasonry?" Pan He was startled. And Li Yunxin, who was at the top of the mast, let out a ha with interest. He had been standing and didn't feel tired. But at this time he seemed to be interested in watching a show. He first waved his hand and summoned a cloud under him. Then he touched the void, found a chair and sat down. Then he rubbed his palm on the little finger of his left hand. There was a golden pill in his palm. This thing was called Red Heaven Golden Pill. First he used the essence brewing pill, that Xiaxing regarded as a treasure, to refine a furnace of red pill. Then he used the red pill and other natural treasures to refine 9 heaven powder. This 9 heaven powder was nourished in a fine gold furnace for 300 years, and then combined with some other treasures to refine red heaven pill. Once the red heaven pill was done, it would take 16 years and 9 months to refine it into a red heaven golden pill. In order to refine a scarlet firmament gold pill, it would take about 400 years, using hundreds of origin brewing pills as a primer, and supplemented with all kinds of heavenly treasures that were worth hundreds of thousands of origin brewing pills. He had about 15 or 16 of these pills in his hand. They were glistening yellow and golden, about the size of a broad bean. Because of the refining method, there was a kind of wonderful smoke, very much like the pot gas that ordinary people talked about when cooking. Li Yunxin picked one up and threw it into his mouth. While looking at the scene in the mirror, he chewed noisily. Eating this pill like this was a waste of its medicinal properties, just like the pills he ate on Cloud Mountain to replenish the demon power in his body. But now he liked the taste of this pill. When he was a human, the only things he could eat were grains and miscellaneous foods. Now that he was a demon, his steel teeth were indestructible, and he felt that his menu of food had suddenly expanded. Eating. It was nothing more than the taste and texture of the food. No matter how crispy the food was, could it be as crispy as roasted pebbles? Just this one bite was probably equivalent to eating the wealth of a country. If a red heaven golden pill was given to a human emperor, that emperor would probably want to exchange the whole empire for it. When he ate such an astonishingly valuable snack, Xiaxing was smiling in the room. So it's true. This sentence he didn't ask Pan He to answer. She seemed to already know. You are just tools that can move and talk. You don't deserve to play tricks with me. After saying this, his palm released a little spiritual power. Then he asked Pan He to absorb some of the essence brewing pill. The woman's face immediately had a healthy color. His aura had also calmed down from its weak state. She clenched her teeth and said in a low voice, "Daoist Xia." Xiaxing snorted coldly, "I'll ask you a second time. Who is the biggest enemy of your Freemasonry in this world?" When Li Yunxin, who was watching the show from the clouds, heard this sentence, his body slightly leaned forward. He seemed to be nervous. He even put down the second red heaven golden pill that he was about to put into his mouth. He already knew this woman Pan He. This woman was a little smart and ambitious. She met a good opportunity to take the position, and felt that she had a chance to advance. So she had the drive to risk her life. First she dared to look for him, then she dared to look for Xiaxing. And she didn't see herself as a human. And as Xiaxing said, she really treated herself as a tool. What happened tonight was proof of that. Even when this woman was on the verge of death and was badly mutilated, she still wanted to smile for Xiaxing to see. She was extremely ruthless. She was extremely ruthless to herself and others. If she wasn't so stupid, she was actually very similar to Li Yunqin himself. Because Pan He was this kind of person. So Li Yunqin could guess what she would say. She originally wanted to tell Xiaxing that Xinryu is the sky demon. Because they, the members of the new Freemasonry who only knew part of the truth, still thought that the so-called Great Calamity was really some invasion of the sky demon. They should also know that the origin of this child from heaven was related to the elders of Cloud Mountain. Since they were related, they should be in the same camp. And Xiaxing asked her, "Who is the enemy of the Freemasonry?" According to Li Yunqin's speculation, he probably wanted to use this question to indirectly confirm his own guess. This Xiaxing was extremely smart. So he knew the strategy of asking questions. To get the answer to a question, it was best not to directly ask the question. Also, don't listen to the enemy's unnecessary details and nonsense. Because those details and nonsense might be misleading. Only ask what you want to hear, then integrate the results and compare them. This was the best way to get the truth in a situation where there was too much information. The enemy of the Freemasonry was naturally the organization that he belonged to, the organization that belonged to Art Saint Chenjiao. And Pan He, this woman who wasn't afraid of death and also wanted to take the position, would not obediently surrender at this time. She would definitely want to try and achieve her goal. So she would say, "It's Xinryu," Li Yunqin said softly, staring straight at Pan He. "It's Xinryu," Pan He said softly without any hesitation. "Ha." Li Yunqin leaned back in his chair and tossed the second jindan into his mouth. She still wanted to lure Xiaxing, the child from heaven, to cause trouble for the Xinryu and achieve their goal. Hearing her answer, Xiaxing was silent for a while. It was indeed the answer he wanted. The god of Xinryu was the leader of the Little Demon Protection. For him, he believed that the Little Demon Protection created by the Xinryu was the organization that he should find. And his organization was the enemy of the Freemasonry. Pan He's answer indeed supported his point of view. And for him, there was indeed a factor that Li Yunqin didn't know that made him believe in this. He asked the second question just to see if Pan He would start telling the truth, since he thought he already knew the answer. In fact, Pan He lied. But Xiaxing believed that what Pan He said was true. This was the part that made Li Yunqin the happiest and most excited. At this time, such an interesting thing was rare. The two people with ulterior motives, because the information they had was limited, they both thought that they knew everything. They said their own lies, but in the end, it became the truth in each other's ears, and made each other even more certain of their own thoughts. Li Yunqin slapped his thigh and laughed. Although his laughter was blocked by the barrier that he cast and no one could hear it, he still felt that it was extremely amusing and carefree. Halfway through his laughter, he suddenly stopped laughing and snorted coldly. Back then, when Su Yusong and Zhuamuja saw him being played around by all kinds of fake news, they probably laughed like this too. Those two bastards. Fortunately, there was nothing left of them. Li Yunqin snorted again, threw the third jindan into his mouth and chewed it fiercely. Since Xiaxing got the answer he wanted, after a moment of silence, his expression became slightly relaxed. He circulated qi in his palm again. Pan He let out a moan. The wounds on her back and lower body began to heal slowly. But at the same time, it was extremely itchy and she couldn't help but moan a few more times. These moans seemed to arouse Xiaxing's interest. But at least he knew that he was doing something serious now. He only reached out his other hand to Pan He's chest and fiercely pinched it a few times. As he played with it, he said, "At least you knew your place and told the truth. Let me ask you again, is there anyone else like you on this ship?" "Other people like you." Li Yunqin knew that Xiaxing was referring to people like Mu Nanju and the Freemasonry. He only knew about Mu Nanju after he went to Rong City in the state of Yu. This Xiaxing should not know about it now. It was best not to tell him. So Li Yunqin's fingers moved, and he was finally ready to interrupt their conversation. But then he stopped, because someone else moved. It was Pan He's husband Wu Jiasong, who was sitting outside Xiaxing's vault, waiting in the cold wind for a long time. At this time, he finally couldn't wait any longer. He gritted his teeth and muttered something. He suddenly stood up, turned around and was about to smash the door. But when his aggressive hand was about to touch the door, he stopped, as if he was hesitating. After hesitating for about 2 or 3 breaths, he fiercely stamped his feet. He lightly knocked a few times. In the room, Xiaxing's words were interrupted by the sound of knocking on the door. He was not in a hurry to ask. Instead, he sneered and put more force into his hand. Your man has been waiting outside for a few hours. Do you want to call him in? Chapter 6:13. Pan He was about to speak, but Xiaxing wasn't asking for her opinion. She didn't know what he was thinking. He suddenly exerted force in his palm and dissolved half of the elemental brew pill in her mouth. The wounds on Pan He's body healed quickly. It only took 2 or 3 breaths. The scabs on the surface of her body fell off. She returned to her fair, delicate and fragrant appearance a few hours ago. Seeing her like this, Xiaxing laughed repeatedly. He waved his hand to undo the restriction in the cabin and said in a low voice, "Who is it?" Wu Jiasong had been knocking outside the cabin for a while. Now that he finally heard someone's voice, he was stunned. When Xiaxing shouted "Speak" again, he hurriedly said, My Daoist priest's room is." Xiaxing looked at Pan He. This woman had recovered her strength. Hearing their conversation, she was about to pick up her clothes on the ground. However, her pair of jade rabbits were in Xiaxing's hands, so she didn't dare to get up and walk away. She only tried to move a little, but Xiaxing pulled her into his arms and pinched her with his fingers. He squinted his eyes evilly and waved his hand again. The cabin door opened silently. "Your wife?" He squinted at Wu Jiasong, who was standing at the cabin door with his hands still in the air. "Your wife is not bad. What's the matter?" This ugly and lewd scene unfolded in front of Wu Jiasong. His wife was naked and in Daoist priest Ye's arms. Her hair was messy and her skin was flushed. Even the bed was half collapsed. There was still a certain smell in the room. How could he not know what had happened in the past few hours? Pan He wanted to lower her head and turn around. However, she couldn't move because of Xiaxing's hand. Wu Jiasong could only see her clearly. He raised his head and put on a calm expression. "What are you doing here? Go back." Wu Jiasong stared at the two of them and his expression froze. He seemed to have turned into a puppet. He could only move after 2 or 3 breaths. At first he seemed to listen to Pan He and subconsciously took a step back. But then he stopped, widened his eyes and pointed at Xiaxing. His lips trembled. "You," Xiaxing tilted his head. "That was right. It was your wife who delivered herself to our doorstep. Why do you want to play too?" Hearing this, Wu Jiasong still said, You. After saying these 3 words, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Pan He opened her mouth as if she wanted to scream, but she swallowed it back. Xiaxing snorted in disappointment. He raised his hand and pinched Pan He's face, taking out the origin brew pill that had already become smaller. He pushed her away and said with a frown, "Don't be an eyesore here. Get him out of here." Pan He was startled. She hurriedly picked up her clothes from the ground, put them on, tied them up and ran to help Wu Jiasong up. Xiaxing said coldly, "Come back tonight." Li Yunxin watched all of this from the sky. When he saw this, he let out a soft, because when Xiaxing toyed with Pan He and now humiliated Wu Jiasong, he could understand and experience a little. However, he had never experienced Wu Jiasong's emotional state before. It was hard for him to imagine what kind of feeling it was. To him, this was a novelty. He frowned and pondered for a while, then shook his head. He thought about it. Although it was a novelty to him, it shouldn't be comfortable. It was better for him not to try it. But because he couldn't experience empathy more deeply, he didn't have too much sympathy for Wu Jiasong's experience. Instead, he understood Xiaxing better. This person was also a pervert. He had seen too many perverts in this world. First of all, he himself was one. Those demons and cultivators, from a human's point of view, were all perverts. His situation didn't need to be mentioned. It was because of physiological reasons in his previous life, and a strange experience that led to an extremely special psychological condition which was brought to this life. Although he had already begun to strive to be a normal person in this life, there was still a long way to go to reach his goal. Otherwise, which normal person would be watching here in high spirits? Those demons and cultivators, due to their own reasons, all had incomplete emotions and were similarly strange. And this Xiaxing, when Li Yunxin first saw him, he felt that this person was also quite enigmatic. Calm, steady, smart and scheming. According to this evaluation, he really shouldn't have let Pan He into the house tonight. Even if he entered the house, he shouldn't have let Pan He into his bed. Impulsive lust would cause people to let down their guard and they might accidentally reveal key information. But this guy was different. Not only did he have a big fight, but he also seemed to have a very heavy taste. This made Li Yunxin puzzled. He originally thought that before he came here his identity should be relatively special, and he should have received training. Perhaps he was similar to a secret agent in his world. If he was an ordinary person because of a soul with the memories and lust of an adult, in the body of a young man in his teens, and suppressed in the deep mountains for more than 10 years. At this time, there was a beautiful woman who took the initiative to come to him, and he did have the ability and capital to do whatever he wanted. Li Yunxin wouldn't be surprised to do what he did tonight. But in a situation where he seemed to have received training, and knew that the environment around him is not very peaceful, it was really too unprofessional to first vent his lust before asking. No powerful character that Li Yunxin knew would do such a thing. There were probably two possibilities for this situation. One possibility was that this person himself had such a personality defect. But Li Yunxin knew that his body seemed to carry important information, and it was fixed to be projected here from another world. It was not a wise choice to use a carrier with such a terrible defect to carry important information. The mastermind behind the scenes who had the ability to achieve such a goal shouldn't be stupid enough to make such a mistake. The other possibility was that he seemed to have never seen a woman before. Or it could be said that the place he came from had very few opportunities to contact women, and his lust was also strongly restrained. On this point, Li Yunxin could see some clues from his first 2 rounds. Because his new body couldn't adapt well to strong stimulation, it was normal for him to be a quick shooter twice. But his jerky movements at the beginning were not normal. He seemed to have, indeed, had no such experience. So he covered it up with an attitude of arrogance and indifference, and with Pan He's flattery and intentional guidance he quickly got into the mood. Then like a child who got a new toy he couldn't stop playing. These thoughts flashed through his mind in the blink of an eye. At this moment he remembered many things from the past, some things that he didn't find strange in the past, but now compared with Xiaxing's situation he finally found some clues. Li Chunfeng and Shangguanyu sometimes talked about women. In the past he felt that he was pretending to be a child and neither of them could tell. Now he knew that both sides were acting. He was pretending to be a child and the two were pretending to be his parents. They were observing in the dark. Sometimes, they would inadvertently talk about things between men and women. It wasn't any hardcore content. It was just some questions about love. And they might have deliberately led him to express his views, in a way that would make his parents laugh. Now that he thought about it, if there was a soul hiding in this body with normal desires and normal experiences, under their guidance, he would unintentionally express some views that were normal and not strange compared with his current identity. But Li Yunxin wasn't a normal person, so he couldn't say any normal views. Now that he thought about it, if it was this Xiaxing he probably couldn't say it either. It seemed that because of this, in the eyes of Li Chunfeng and Shangguanyu, his identity became more appropriate. It could be counted as a coincidence. But if he used these details as evidence he should also draw a conclusion. His second inference about Xiaxing was correct. In the other world he came from, there were very few opportunities to interact with women. He used the idea of that world. Because he had always been faintly aware, and tonight because of Xiaxing he finally confirmed one thing. The world that Xiaxing and the elders used to belong to, it wasn't the world that he was familiar with, the world that he came from. As a result he found the answers to many questions that had puzzled him before. Bai Yanjun once took him to a space of nothingness and said some strange things to him. He meant that if Li Yunxin was the person they were looking for he should be able to understand what he said. But he couldn't understand, he could only perfunctorily bluff his way through. That was the first time he suspected that there was another real crown prince. Then he went to Cloud Mountain and asked Grandpa D 2 questions. But Grandpa D immediately lost interest in him and saw through his identity. Li Yunxin thought he was a smart person. He wouldn't be so stupid as to carefully prepare 2 questions, but the more he asked the worse it would get. Now he understood that it wasn't that he was crazy. It was that Grandpa D and he didn't belong to the same world, so naturally no matter how he asked, it would get him into trouble. It was also at that time that he began to suspect that there was not only another real crown prince, but also another world. That world should also have a highly developed civilization. It might even be more developed than where he came from. In his previous life he had heard of the so-called March 18th incident. It was said that an unbelievably advanced and mysterious fleet of aircrafts had appeared in his old country. And now, did they also come from the original world where Xianxia and the elders were? Then what about Qinzhao the painting saint? She had left all kinds of details in this world. It was because of those details that Li Yunqin had a preconceived notion that Qinzhao and the elders should come from the same world as him. Then Qinzhao, where did he come from? Apart from that, there was another crucial question. That was, why did Li Chunfeng, Shangguanyu, and even the mastermind of Southernwood House behind them observe him for more than 10 years instead of directly asking if he was that person? This illogical situation made Li Yunqin have another bold speculation. It was indeed possible that he was someone else. This someone else didn't refer to someone like Li Yunqin who had a strange fate and ended up in the wrong place. Instead, it referred to the other forces that Southernwood House and the others had included in their plans in advance. It was possible that the person who had been sent here wasn't the real crown prince they wanted, but the impersonator, who was also very dangerous to them. This speculation was very bold. But what he knew now was far beyond the scope of reasonable. If he didn't speculate more boldly, he was afraid that he would always be led by the nose. If he looked at things again with this speculation, it seemed that all the unreasonable things were clear. For example, why did Qinzhao and the elders of Cloud Mountain all transmigrators, but the Southernwood House force that Qinzhao left behind had become enemies with the elders? It was possible that they weren't very friendly in the other world. And now this Xianxia, if he really was the real crown prince, the key information he carried should be very useful to both sides. Therefore, although this guy was wary of the Freemasonry, he wasn't as fearful as Li Yunqin had been. He should also know that he had important information and that the Freemasonry wouldn't dare to do anything to him. This could also explain why the Freemasonry would always give Li Yunqin a chance of survival despite suppressing him in every possible way. So, what important information was it? In that short instant, thousands of thoughts flashed through Li Yunqin's mind. The surrounding scene seemed to be moving in slow motion in his eyes. Everything that Xianxia had done tonight had a huge impact on him. It had also opened a new door for him. The countless details that had been stored in his mind finally showed signs of being sorted out. That meant, it should be related to the calamity that the Freemasonry people were talking about. The Freemasonry elders used the calamity to brush off their subordinates. This statement wasn't baseless. It was just that they had packaged the truth in a different way. The so-called calamity should be referring to something else. Perhaps the key information that Xianxia had could help them resolve the calamity. As for what it was, perhaps he would only have an answer when he understood this world better. When he first came here, he thought that everything was very normal. It was just that there was a different power system. Now the more he understood, the stranger he felt. What was the so-called weak water? What was the celestial? Why did the Black Yama King die for no reason? Why were everyone, including mortals and cultivators, trapped in this vast midland? This Xianxia, was he the person that Mu Nanju really wanted? Xianxia would never have thought that after venting for more than 4 hours, Li Yunqin would understand so many questions. If he really knew, he would probably castrate himself out of regret. At this moment, Pan He had already supported Wu Jiasong. Wu Jiasong didn't refuse and became like a puppet, allowing her to manipulate him. It was as if the mouthful of blood he had just spat out had spat out a lot of things. The two of them walked out. Pan He's expression was the same as usual, as if nothing had happened. Wu Jiasong didn't say a word. Only when they got down from the deck and walked to the side of the ship did the man stop. He slowly withdrew his hand from Pan He's arm and looked at her with a dull gaze. He seemed to be waiting for her to explain. Pan He frowned and looked around. The night was dark and the sea was foggy. "I'm cold," she said. "Let's go back and talk." But Wu Jiasong didn't move. The man who cared for Pan He so much was gone. Pan He sighed. "All right." Chapter 6:14. After saying this, she was silent for a while and began to slowly tie her clothes again. Wu Jiasong's gaze fell on her right hand. It had recovered. In fact, Pan He only wore a robe. She did not have time to wear the rest of her clothes and left them in Xianxia's room. The only thing she needed to tie was the belt of the robe. Usually she only needed to move her fingers to tie these two small belts. However, at this time she pulled and pulled but couldn't tie it properly. He seemed to be thinking about something and hesitating about something. The fog on the sea was heavy. The two of them were silent for a while. Their hair, eyelashes, and beards were covered with a layer of water droplets. After a long time, Pan He sighed again and finally said, "Now I will tell you the truth. I have another identity that you have never known. You shouldn't have seen what happened tonight. But even if you saw it, there is nothing you can do. He and I did not know each other before. But I need to get something from him." Speaking of this, Pan He raised her hand and touched Wu Jiasong's face. The man moved slightly as if he wanted to avoid it. However, his eyes were dull like a puppet. In the end, he didn't move. So Pan He's fingers brushed Wu Jiasong's face like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. Then she lowered her hand to fix his collar and whispered, "Thank you for taking care of me all these years. I owe you. When we reach the East Sea chain, you should get off the boat. I have to continue to the east. What I want to do, you will die if you get involved." After saying this, Wu Jiasong still didn't speak. Pan He waited for a while, then sighed for the third time and was about to turn away. But she heard him whisper, "Did you find him or did he force you?" Pan He was stunned. He actually asked this. She shook her head. "Now that things have come to this, is it him or you?" Wu Jiasong interrupted her. Pan He was silent for a while. "It's me." So Wu Jiasong's face slowly became lively as if the frost was thawing. He took a step back as if he wanted to see Pan He's whole body. "Why don't I know? Of course, I know you have another identity. I know you have martial arts skills. When I bought you, you didn't explain your background clearly. I thought you were a Jianghu heroine." At this point she smiled sadly. "It's my fault for reading too many romance novels. I even thought of stories for you." He thought to himself, "Perhaps you're a hero who offended your enemies and wanted to live in seclusion. Then you came to me. Since I like this story, I never asked you. I just thought that I have a lot of friends. If you have a calamity, I can also resolve it for you." As he said this in a low voice, his brows slowly furrowed. "Why didn't I think about it? How could there be a heroine in a legendary novel? A woman walking in the pugilistic world, showing her face in public, mingling with a group of bandits, robbers, and people who fight fiercely and bravely. What kind of thing can she be? There are so many heroines like you. Those who didn't produce anything and didn't make any money, put it nicely, were wandering the Jianghu, but in fact, as long as they covered their faces, they were bandits who robbed others. There was no more money to rob. Once she opened her legs, she would become a prostitute. If she didn't do well, she would marry a bandit or go to a remote place to be a foreign woman. If she did well, she would have some reputation and become a heroine, but it's just, those girls in the brothel use their talent and beauty as a gimmick. You guys use your heroism as a gimmick. Marry someone like me, Jiasong. Enough. Enough." When Wu Jiasong said these words, his tone became more and more rapid and his voice became louder and louder. But Pan He was very calm. Seeing his face turned red again, she interrupted him, "I've been with you for so many years. You know I don't have time to do those things. Don't be angry. You just vomited blood. You're not in good health." Wu Jiasong suddenly shouted loudly, "I don't need your hypocrisy." His cry was heard by all the sailors on night watch. So they came over to see. Lu Baishui couldn't hide in the shadow and pretend nothing had happened. Therefore Li Yunxin saw him jump down from the second floor with a beautiful movement. He pretended that he had just walked over, stuck his head out from afar and shouted in a low voice, "Who's there? What's going on?" While talking, he walked over slowly. Li Yunxin felt that Lu Baishui didn't really want to get involved, so he was dawdling. This guy was really smart. He knew where the water was deep and where the water was shallow. His name had the word water in it. A famous person once said, "A small temple is full of demons and a shallow water is full of turtles." Now he felt that this sentence was very true. There were only 200 people, but they had a lot of power. He regretted making this trip at this time. Wu Jiasong sneered, looked at Pan He and said loudly, "Good. Someone is coming." Then he looked at Lu Baishui. "What's going on? You want to know what's going on? Okay, let me tell you." His voice became louder and louder. At this moment, Xianxia was still in the cabin. He closed the door, sat cross-legged on the side of the wooden bed that didn't collapse, and continued to cultivate as if nothing had happened. This guy must have entered the sage mode to vent his anger. It was a good time to suppress his inner demons and break through the realm. This method was the same as those cultivators who went on a killing spree in the mortal world, passed a fake tribulation and then continued to cultivate. Li Yunxin sighed. He thought that almost all the bad guys in the world learned without a teacher when they did bad things. Only good people would work hard to learn. He had learned from Li Chunfeng and Shang Guanyu for more than 10 years. He could be considered a good person. But when Wu Jiasong shouted like that, Pan He looked at him pleadingly and whispered, "Jiasong, don't." Wu Jiasong also stared at her. His eyes were full of anger. But, looking at her, he didn't know why, but he suddenly felt that the anger in his heart was gone. It was still burning and it didn't go out. But now that he was weak and powerless from the burning, he suddenly didn't want to say a single word. He stared at her for a while, then turned his head and said loudly, "Nothing. Nothing. Me." He bit his words. "Something is wrong with this woman. Nothing." Lu Baishui wanted him to say nothing. Hearing this, he coughed. "Ah, that's good. The wind is strong on the sea. Please go back to the cabin. Let's go back." So saying, he beckoned to the sailors on night watch who were walking over and walked away himself. But Li Yunxin could see clearly that Master Lu didn't really leave. He went to another place to hide from the wind and continued to listen. But the wind was strong and he was far away, so he didn't know if he could hear clearly. This guy was also a worrywart. Thus, the man and the woman returned to their own world. Wu Jiasong looked at Pan He and sneered, "You told me not to. You know this kind of thing is not to be said." Pan He shook her head. "Jiasong." Wu Jiasong continued to sneer, "Since you know shame, you still dare to do it. All these years you..." Pan He interrupted him. "Jiasong, I don't want to kill you." "You don't want to?" Wu Jiasong was stunned. "What?" Pan He shook her head gently. She wrapped her robe and squinted at the fog on the sea. "You don't know who I am. You are not afraid of Jianghu people and you look down on heroes. Well then let me ask you, are you afraid of cultivators?" Wu Jiasong continued to be stunned. "Cultivators? I work for those cultivators. We can be considered to be their lackeys. But it's not an ordinary Jianghu gang. Jianghu gangs work for their own selfish interests. But what we want to do is related to the world." When Pan He said this, her voice was light and calm in sharp contrast with the man in front of her. She looked back at him. "What I just did is hard for any ordinary person to accept, I know. But I'm not an ordinary person. Don't ask me what I want to do. If you know this, leave quickly." Her calm tone and solemn words finally made Wu Jiasong slowly calm down. There was still terrible anger, resentment, and grievance in his heart. However, he was not an impulsive teenager and he had some understanding of Pan He. Therefore he knew what she said might be true. He stared at her in confusion. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I don't understand." He raised his hand and pointed to the distance as if he was pointing to their home on land and asked her, "Am I not good to you? Do we lack money? Why do you still want to do these things?" Pan He finally smiled sadly. "You are good to me. We don't lack money. But before you bought me, I was already doing these things. If I could choose, how would I end up like this?" Wu Jiasong was stunned. Then he suddenly took 2 steps forward and held Pan He in his arms. In a low and quick voice, as if he was afraid that someone would hear, he said, "That's good. That's good. I forgive you. You can choose now and don't do those things anymore, okay? Let's get off the ship when we reach the East Sea chain, okay?" Pan He did not break free. Her face was pressed against Wu Jiasong's chest, but she was still very calm. Her voice was also very calm, very cold. "Jiasong, you can't choose. Go." His body froze. The two of them hugged like this in the sea breeze for a while and Pan He slowly broke free. Wu Jiasong was stunned. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "What happened to make you like this? Who is that Daoist priest? If you want me to go, you should at least let me know the reason." Pan He did not say anything and turned to leave. Wu Jiasong grabbed her hand, holding it very tightly. But Pan He also turned her wrist and with a little force she caught his hand and threw it to the side. Wu Jiasong did not give up and continued to grab her. She moved sideways to avoid, but Wu Jiasong hugged her waist. "If you don't tell me, I won't go. I, Wu Jiasong, have always been a person who knows what is right and wrong. This kind of thing happened and you ask me not to know. Then just kill me here." Pan He stopped. Her face was still very calm. But suddenly 2 lines of tears rolled down as if the tears were dripped on her face by someone else and not her own tears. "Why do you have to do this? Even if you know, what can you do?" But Wu Jiasong did not see her tears and only said with hatred, "I don't care." Pan He turned her back to him and said, Okay. Then I will tell you so that you can leave clearly. I am a member of the Freemasons. I am the person in charge of the Eastern Sea country of the Freemasons. That Daoist has a great secret and even more frightening ability. I went to find him to tell him these things and tell him to go to the Dragon Island. If I do this, I will have a great merit. Maybe I can get promoted and I won't have to do things like this anymore. If we go to the east, we will encounter all kinds of demons and cultivators. Every one of them is very powerful. I can only rely on Daoist to protect me, save my life and live to accomplish those things. He is a human after all, he has desires. Because of my body he will casually pull me for a while. I know I am not smart but I have a strong will. Right now my body can still be used. After a few more years I will become old and weak and I won't even be able to use this body. If I still stay in this position I will die a terrible death sooner or later. I am grateful to you for taking care of me for so many years and letting me live a good life. So I feel sorry for you and want to ask you to leave. But you, when she said this, tears rolled down her face more quickly. However, his hands, which were hanging by his sides, suddenly tightened. But you, why do you have to ask? Why do you want me to kill you? As soon as she said this, she suddenly slammed her palms backwards. How could Wu Jiasong expect her to kill him like this? When he heard Pan He's words, the hands that were originally hugging her in a fit of pique slowly loosened, as if he couldn't bear to do it. Then he took the two palms solidly. With a bang he was sent flying and fell 2 or 3 steps away. He landed on the deck and wanted to get up. But he only tilted his head to look at Pan He, and then spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted. Pan He stood there for a while, then raised her hand to wipe her face and slowly turned around. At this time her tears were gone, and her face was as calm as water. She walked 3 steps to Wu Jiasong and without hesitation raised her hand again and was about to strike his head. But at this time, she heard someone say, "If you hit him he will really die. It doesn't matter if he dies." These 3 sentences made Pan He's body suddenly tense up, and she immediately retreated 2 steps, retracting her palms in front of her. Then she saw that there was a man sitting on the ship's railing, dressed in white, looking at her with interest as if he was watching a play. In the future, when you think about the past, you will probably find that no one treated you as well as he did. Won't you regret it to death? After saying this he thought about it again. Then he repeated with certainty, "Yes, that's what happened." Pan He frowned. The man sitting on the ship's railing looked like a middle-aged man. He had a beard but it wasn't long and it was neatly trimmed on his chin, which made him look somewhat rough and refined. He could be considered handsome. If there were no crow's feet at the corner of his eyes he could even be considered handsome. His figure was between burly and thin, and it was the kind of middle-aged man who was sturdy but not fat. The most special thing about him was his eyes. The color of his pupils was very light. It was light blue. There was a strange feeling. Pan He had never seen this person on the ship. Chapter 6:15. She subconsciously turned her head to look at the ship's deck. But there was no reaction from Xianxia, as if he did not notice the existence of this person. So she slowly took a step back and asked cautiously, "Who are you?" She wanted to ask, "Who are you?" or "What are you?" On such a night such a man appeared. He looked like a typical person from the Central Plains, but he had blue eyes. He was obviously not a human. Pan He faintly felt that she had experienced the power of an inhuman. But just like the thought that flashed in her mind when she saw Xianxia, she still could not remember when she had that kind of experience. But the man did not answer her. He just shook his head slightly and continued with interest, "You are a strange woman. I saw you crying. On the one hand you are reluctant to let him go but on the other hand you want to kill him. Are all women in the world like you, saying one thing and doing another?" Pan He frowned, not knowing how to answer him. It was fine if he was a human. But if he was a demon, it was said that demons were eccentric. Like this man in front of her, he might be asking politely now but he might show his fangs the next moment. And from his words, it seemed that he had been hurt by a woman and had a grudge against her. I had no choice. She thought about it again and again but she could not find a way out, so she said in a low voice, "I will repay him by doing anything in my next life." Next life? Humph. The man snorted as if he did not care about her answer. "Only mortals like you believe in the next life." After saying this he finally jumped down from the side of the ship. And at this time, Pan He also noticed a detail. When he landed, his left foot was a little lame and his brows were slightly wrinkled. It seemed that he was injured recently. As soon as he landed, he looked behind Pan He. He said loudly, "Brother Lu, come out and meet me." At this time, Li Yunxin straightened his body in the clouds. There were only 3 golden beans left in his hand. He did not eat anymore, turned his palm over and withdrew it. After a slight hesitation, he stood up again. So the chair under him disappeared. Then he stared at the new person for a while, frowning slightly. In his eyes, this fellow was also immortal. This meant that he couldn't see through his cultivation level. Perhaps he was only slightly weaker than him or on par with him or stronger than him. The third possibility was extremely low. In terms of individual strength, the existence of Long Sun, who was stronger than Shi Yi's mysterious realm, could be considered to be as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. He couldn't see the person's face clearly. In fact, if one were to look at him from 10 steps away, they would only be able to see a translucent, faintly glowing silhouette just like Li Yunxin. This was some kind of brilliant invisibility technique that could hide one's spirit, energy and spirit. However, Li Yunxin could sense the changes in the spiritual energy in the sea. Although the qi of heaven and earth was in chaos now, a powerful person would still cause slight disturbances when he or she passed by. It was hard to tell by himself, but now he had too many treasures in his hands. With the help of a Dharma treasure, he could see everything clearly. Just like when he saw the Lord Shinryu in the painting on his fan, he could see it now. This person's qi was inextricably linked with the qi of heaven and earth, very similar to the appearance of the Lord Shinryu in the city of Wei. At that time when the city of Wei was burned, he had already taken over. The Lord Shinryu came from the sky, and on his fan, there was a painting drawn with the power of millions of spirits, faithfully projecting the mountains and rivers near the city of Wei into the painting. The real qi of heaven and earth could only be seen from the painting, and some other things could be seen. From this he found that the Lord Shinryu had a golden core. Countless rays of golden light spread out from the core in all directions, almost forming a close connection with the mountains, rivers and plants in the painting. It seems to have fused with nature and the spiritual qi of this world. It was an inseparable part of the background of this world. The scene at that time gave Li Yunxin a great shock. From what he knew, it seemed that if he wanted to destroy the Lord Shinryu, he had to destroy the world first. He was bound to the world. After that, he naturally went to see the Dragon Son and also himself. He wanted to see if the Dragon Son, who was assigned to various places by the Lord Shinryu, had a similar performance, but it didn't exist. He used to think that this kind of situation only appeared on the Supreme Dragon God, but now, he found that this uninvited guest also had it on him. In Li Yunxin's eyes, he was just a silhouette. But if he looked carefully at the Dharma treasure in his hand, he would see that there were countless extremely thin, extremely faint rays of light, connected with the sea and the world. The Dharma treasure was, after all, not as detailed as the Dharma treasure that he drew himself. But he also knew this person's situation was the same as the Lord Shinryu. He was the world and the world was him. Then he should be. Li Yunxin's face turned ugly. When he was on land, Liu Baishui told him about the rumors along the coast. He said that the Dragon King inland were all inferior Dragon King, and the Dragon King of the sea, the ocean, was more than 10 times larger than the inland, and the number of living creatures in the ocean was more than 1,000,000 times larger than the inland, was the true Dragon King. At that time, Li Yunxin only smiled. After the Battle of Cloud Mountain, the demons of the world followed Dragon Sun's lead. When did they hear about the Dragon King of the sea? Even if the demons lived deep in the mountains and were ignorant, and the people and demons of this era had no interest in the sea. But these Dragon Sun were created from the dragon soul of the Shinryu. There were already 9 of them, how could there be another 9? But now he saw that this person was similar to the Shinryu. This is the East Sea Dragon King that Liu Baishui mentioned. How? He had already been a fake crown prince. If he found out that the dragon body that he had worked so hard to get was actually a fake Dragon King, he would probably explode. At this time he heard this uninvited guest call out to Liu Baishui. When Liu Baishui hid himself, he could only hide from Pan He and Xiaxing. Now that this person appeared on the ship, he could see through him at a glance. From his tone, it seemed that he was familiar with Liu Baishui. Li Yunxin frowned and looked at Liu Baishui's figure on the ship, his face slightly dark. When that person spoke, only Pan He, Liu Baishui and Wu Jiasong could hear him, and the rest of the people on the ship were isolated. Now that he was standing on the cloud, he could only see. This person seemed to be equally powerful. Li Yunxin didn't know if this person knew who he was, but he didn't want to expose himself. But Lu Baishui knew. Previously, when Xianxia asked him, he didn't say anything. Now, from the tone of this person, it seemed that they were old acquaintances. Li Yunxin didn't know if this person would say anything this time. So his eyes became colder and he saw Lu Baishui come out of his hiding place. Chapter 6:16. But Lu Baishui's expression was a bit strange. As if he recognized this person but didn't expect to see him here. Thus he was somewhat puzzled and his footsteps were slightly hesitant. Seeing him like this, the man laughed again. "Brother Lu, don't you recognize me?" Lu Baishui frowned and walked another 10 steps. When he could see the man's face clearly, he said, "Mr. Shuiyue, why are you here?" This Mr. Shuiyue put his hands behind his back and sighed. "I heard that it's not peaceful here. I was afraid that something would happen to you, so I came to have a look. I didn't expect to see such a good show. Brother Lu, is there anyone on this ship that is giving you a hard time?" Lu Baishui walked forward a few steps and stopped. He didn't answer immediately. Instead he looked at this Mr. Shuiyue for a while and said, "When we met, you said you were a hermit from Hun Sea. Because your ancestors were tired of the conflicts on the land, they hid in the East Sea. But now." Mr. Shuiyue was silent for a while and looked around. "Brother Lu, when I became friends with you, I said that I didn't remember how long I had lived. You are a smart person, don't you know that I am not a human but a god? Why are you asking me this again today?" He smiled. "It seems that I came to the right place. Is it because someone on this ship is threatening you and you don't dare to tell the truth?" Lu Baishui glanced at the deck. Mr. Shuiyue smiled and shook his head. "Brother Lu, do you want to say it's him? I don't think so. It's just a young Daoist. There are many of them on the land. Such a person wouldn't give you a hard time. I think it's someone else." Then he said loudly, "Friends on the ship, why don't you come out and greet me? My friends are here, but you also have friends on my ship." Hearing this, Lu Baishui was surprised. Then he frowned. "Mr. Shuiyue, are you working for the East Sea Dragon King?" This Mr. Shuiyue had known him for about 10 years. But the relationship between humans and gods was different from the relationship between mortals. In the past 10 years they had only met 4 or 5 times. Each time was a long time for Lu Baishui. But for Mr. Shuiyue it was like yesterday. Lu Baishui was indeed a smart person. How could he not know that Shuiyue was not a human? But when he was dealing with the demons on land, he already knew that if a demon disguised as a mortal and came into contact with humans, it was best not to expose him. If they understood each other, they could be friends. If he made it clear, most of the fiendish demons would find it boring and some would even turn hostile. But now Shuiyue had said. And now Shuiyue suddenly appeared on the ship and said such words. Thinking back to the things he had done when the two of them were acquainted. Although he was a mortal and did not know much about the inside story of Li Yunxin's trip, he gradually figured out the truth in his mind after hearing the words of goddess Penglai, who possessed Li Sea in Whitewater Town, and seeing a lot on the boat. Only now did she realize that when Shuiyue Mister said, "You also have friends at my place," perhaps she was referring to that Shangguanyu. This inhuman friend of his was probably also a sea demon working for the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea. But disregarding all other factors, just one thing. If the person Shuiyue Mister was referring to was really the mother of his equally mysterious brother Li, Lu Baishui himself did not like this kind of method. Maybe because he had never enjoyed the love of a father and a mother, he didn't like it. Therefore, when he said this, Shuiyue's pair of light blue eyes slightly brightened. The smile on her face also gradually faded. He looked at Lu Baishui and said, "Oh, Brother Lu, you are not being threatened. You made a new friend and forgot about me?" There was fog on the sea. After Shuiyue appeared, the fog became thicker. As soon as he said this, the thick fog suddenly rolled up and waves rose on the surface of the sea. That was not an ordinary wave. Lu Baishui first felt his feet sink. It was as if his body suddenly became heavy, pressing on the deck. Then he realized that he was not pressing on the deck, but the deck was pushing against his feet. The whole ship was suddenly lifted up. People always used the phrase "a drop in the ocean" to describe a ship sailing on the sea. At this time, this phrase became appropriate. It was as if the ship broke through the fog. Lu Baishui suddenly saw a sea of clouds. However, this sea of clouds was the fog that shrouded the surface of the sea. A gigantic wave of unknown height lifted the Taowu high into the sky, but it was not a wave as steep as a lone peak when General Fubo appeared, but a wave as gentle as a mountain. This meant that this wave was hundreds of feet high and how wide it was. But looking further away, there were still countless waves rising and falling on the vast sea fog. It was as if the East Sea was originally just a basin of water, and the waves were just gentle ripples caused by a gentle breeze on the surface of the sea. But now there was a pair of giant hands in the water stirring it violently. Even a person like Lu Baishui couldn't stand steadily after feeling the huge force from the soles of his feet, and swayed left and right 2 or 3 steps before regaining his footing. The people in the cabin were all awakened and didn't know what was going on. But when he adjusted his breath and was about to speak again, suddenly he felt the momentum of the ship stop. The waves above the sea of clouds in the distance and even the waves below the ship suddenly disappeared. He was shocked and knew that the huge waves had thrown the ship to the apex, and the momentum had decreased. The waves retreated, but the ship was still rising. At this time, the ship was already some distance from the sea. He only had time to reach out to the side of the ship, and then he felt all the internal organs in his body being thrown up and he couldn't stand on anything. He was falling in the air and then there was a loud bang and the seawater splashed on the deck. He hit the ship hard as if he had fallen from a height of several feet. A terrible groan came from the hull of the ship. Lu Baishui didn't know if the keel could withstand such an impact. If it couldn't, the lives of all the people on the ship would be gone. He looked to the side and his heart sank. He saw a broken plank and a mainmast on the raging waves. There was fog on the sea and he couldn't see where the Haizong was. But according to the wave just now, the Haizong was on the top of the wave and the Haizong was on the slope. Faced with such a terrifying wave, the Haizong had most likely capsized. At this time, the roar of the waves was like thunder in the sky, covering the screams of the people on the ship. Xianxia finally felt something was wrong and he poked his head out of the cabin. But Mr. Shueiyue, who was standing steadily, snapped his fingers and the cabin door closed with a bang, knocking him back. It was strange. Although there were loud noises around him, he could hear everything clearly within 10 steps of him. At this time, Lu Baishui stood up from the ground, and saw Pan He pulling Wu Jiasong's unconscious body to the side of the ship. Mr. Shueiyue smiled coldly, "Brother Lu, if you were threatened because you were afraid of that person's supernatural power, let's see if he dares to come out today." Then he looked around and shouted, "Friends on land, why don't you show yourself?" At this time the sea wind was roaring and the waves were roaring. The Haizong was like a small boat in the wind and it could capsize at any time. Mr. Shueiyue still had a faint smile on his face, but it was getting colder and the light on his body was getting brighter. He looked more and more like a powerful god of the sea. Every move he made could change the sea and the sky. Lu Baishui knew the situation was not good. He wasn't afraid of death. But there were still many brothers on the ship. If so many people had died because of his promise and friendship to someone else, what would they have done to deserve it? So he steadied himself in the storm and called out loudly, "Mr. Shueiyue, you and I have been friends for 10 years. Are you really going to bury all of us tonight?" Mr. Shueiyue smiled slightly. "That depends on whether that friend of yours is willing to show up and settle the accounts." Lu Baishui was stunned. Accounts? But when he said this, he suddenly found that the world suddenly became quiet. It was as if the raging waves and raging winds of the world were just a background. Now, just after he said this word, someone suddenly removed the background and replaced it with another one. In the blink of an eye, the thick fog on the surface of the sea dissipated completely, revealing a bright moon on the horizon. The waves also disappeared. Not only did they disappear, but the sea was as calm as a mirror, without a trace of a wave, like a pool of stagnant water. But the most amazing thing was, Lu Baishui could still feel the wind blowing on his face. The sails were still swollen and the ship was still moving quickly. Mr. Shueiyue was stunned. It seemed that he was also surprised by such a drastic change. He abruptly looked around, but he didn't see or sense anything. As for Lu Baishui, he opened his eyes wide in disbelief, not knowing what to think or say. He knew that Li Yunxin was not an ordinary person. He also knew that Li Yunxin had some magical powers. But he didn't know that his magical powers were so powerful. It was so powerful that it could suppress the raging waves of the sea in an instant. Mr. Shueiyue didn't seem to be the Mr. Shueiyue he knew. Li Yunxin was also not the Li Yunxin he knew. Then he heard a clear voice coming from the sky. "Brother Lu. Your Mr. Shueyue is not working for the Dragon King of the East Sea. In my opinion, he is the Dragon King of the East Sea." Lu Baishui followed the voice and looked up. He saw that Li Yunxin had already reverted to her original handsome appearance. She stepped on the void and walked down from the sky. There was a hazy light on his body, just like the light on Mr. Shueyue's body, which made him look like a dream, like a god. Chapter 6:17. Lu Baishui didn't know if it was an illusion, but with every step he took he felt his body shake slightly. It was as if there was an invisible giant foot following his steps, stepping on the surface of the sea again and again, causing the raging waves to be unable to stir even half a bit. Lu Baishui realized this was a real fight between immortals and it was not something he could participate in. With great shock he slowly retreated to the side. He really didn't know what to say or do. 10 days ago he was drinking and having fun with him in the inn, but now he was like a god. Under such circumstances, if a mortal didn't immediately kneel down and worship him, it would be a miracle. Mr. Shueyue didn't stop him. In fact, although this master of the sea still had a smile on his face, his eyebrows were already furrowed imperceptibly. The clear light on his body was jumping, like the internal energy of a martial arts master. If the divine power of a god could be calculated using internal energy, then in Lu Baishui's view, this Mr. Shueyue seemed to have mobilized all the divine power in his body to fight against some kind of power. But he didn't seem to gain any advantage and was even at a slight disadvantage. When Li Yunxin finally walked to the deck, the clear light on Mr. Shueyue's body had already become as bright as a flame. "You want to settle accounts with me?" Li Yunxin raised his hand and pressed down. It seemed to be a very casual movement, but also like he was brushing away something. "Tell me what accounts?" There was a crisp cracking sound. Cracks appeared on the deck. And the center of those radial cracks was right under Mr. Shueyue's feet. He stopped smiling and his expression became a little strange. But Lu Baishui couldn't tell what was strange. He only felt that his chest was stuffy. Before, when Mr. Shueyue was angry, he raised incredible waves on the surface of the sea, and the momentum was extremely terrifying. But now, those waves were calmed by Li Yunxin and became extremely quiet. And now this silence had reached a certain extreme. It was as if the entire sea was imprisoned and was getting tighter and tighter. The sea breeze stopped and the surface of the sea was like a mirror. Now even the air was horribly stuffy. Even with Lu Baishui's cultivation he had to use a bit of effort to open his mouth to breathe. What was even stranger was that in his ears, he began to hear the sound of his own blood flowing and his heartbeat. When he realized this he was shocked. He realized that there was no sound at all, other than the sound of Li Yunxin and Shueyu talking and the sound of the deck breaking. His voice was suppressed by some kind of power. What kind of terrifying and mystical power was this? Lu Baishui gasped. He started to think about the days he spent with Li Yunxin. What kind of person was he with? Mr. Shueyue also seemed to be straining. But he was still much better than Lu Baishui. He took a step forward. There were ripples on the surface of the sea and the air seemed to relax a little. But this step was like fanning the air in a closed room. After taking a breather for a while he suppressed it again and with a buzzing sound, the entire ship sank again. It was just that he had sunk because he had been thrown onto the waves. Now that he was sinking, it was like loose soil being compacted, the surface of the sea was pressed down. As a result, even more fine cracks appeared under his feet, and his expression became increasingly strange. Even his voice changed as if his entire body was suffocating in the water. "Your friend, these days he has swallowed the demon generals under my command, the whale sharks of the sea. It wasn't easy for him to attain the Tao, but he killed nearly 100 of them. Today he fought with me but he was so stubborn. He even dared to hurt me. Now he has been captured and imprisoned by me. How do you want to settle this debt with the East Sea tribe?" His words were smooth but his voice became more and more dull. By the last few words his voice was so low that it was unclear. At this time, Lu Baishui realized why Mr. Shueyue's expression was strange. His face and his body seemed to be melting, his eyebrows, eyes, nose and mouth slowly drooped. As he spoke he walked towards Li Yunxin. But with every step he took his body sank a little. When he finished speaking he was like a melting sugar doll. Even his legs were bent. Li Yunxin only sneered. "So you are here to interrogate me?" What a coincidence. I also have something to ask you. East Sea Dragon King. With every word Li Yunxin said, the person in front of him became more distorted and abstract. Is Shangguan Yu with you? The visitor's body suddenly froze. Although his face had already melted into a ball, one could still see the surprise on his face. You, but he couldn't say anything more. His body finally couldn't bear the terrible pressure, and with a boom he turned into countless flowing lights. Those flowing lights should have dissipated, but at the moment of disintegration, an iron chain suddenly appeared in Li Yunxin's palm. He swung it at the flowing lights and locked them all. Lu Baishui was shocked. Brother Li. Li Yunxin didn't look at him. He turned his left hand again and took out a piece of magic paper. He wiped it on the iron chain. It seemed that all the light spots on the chain were wiped into the paper. Then he glanced at Lu Baishui and said lazily, Brother Lu, are you worried? Don't worry. It's just the incarnation of the East Sea Dragon King. It's just that he probably didn't expect that his incarnation wouldn't be able to leave after coming here. He must be beating his chest and stamping his feet in Mount Penglai, and is so angry that he wants to beat someone up. Saying this, he squinted at Lu Baishui. Maybe he also hates you. I guess you can't be friends anymore. Ah. He shook his head and sighed. What a fragile friendship. Lu Baishui was stunned. I didn't mean. Li Yunxin waved his hand and drawled. Well, Brother Lu, I am not a narrow-minded person. If you can't be friends with him, you can be friends with me. You and I are friends. Tell me about it. How did you get to know this Mr. Shueiyue? What does he ask you to do? Lu Baishui was stunned. Only then did he realize that the sea had started to ripple again. The sound of the wind could be heard and his breathing was no longer suppressed. But after hearing Li Yunxin's words, he felt more depressed. He looked at Li Yunxin for a while without fear and then slowly stepped back. Brother Li, are you going to interrogate me? Li Yunxin laughed. Interrogate? Brother Lu, your friend from the East Sea sank the Haizong. He almost fed you guys to the fish. But I turned the tide, and saved you guys. Now I am interrogating the person who wanted to kill you 2 ships. How can it be called an interrogation? Or Brother Lu has some secrets that you can't tell me? After saying this, the smile on Li Yunxin's face disappeared. He looked at Lu Baishui coldly for a while. But Lu Baishui heaved a sigh and looked at him seriously. I only knew he was Mr. Shueiyue. I didn't know. He was the Dragon King of the East Sea. And I didn't know Ling Xi was with him. Just like you were Lu Hao Baishui before. Li Yunxin sneered. Not the Sea King Lu Fei? Brother Li used to be a Jianghu hero, but then you became a cultivator. And then you became a godlike figure today. Lu Baishui sighed. Are we still going to bicker like this? Okay. No bickering. Then tell me, how many things are you hiding from me? Li Yunxin sneered. He waved his hand and a table suddenly appeared in front of him. He spread the magic paper on the table and a magic brush appeared in his hand. Now the sky is clear and the moon is bright. Brother Lu, take your time and I will listen to you. Then I will finish this painting. It will be a wonderful thing. Lu Baishui's eyes subconsciously fell on the table in front of Li Yunxin. After seeing the miraculous scene just now, he was not too surprised to see Li Yunxin make a table out of thin air. But when he looked at the paper again, he couldn't help but be surprised. There was a painting on the paper. The painting was simple. It was the sea. It was drawn in a way that Lu Baishui had never seen before. It seemed to be just a few strokes with a brush dipped in color. But when Lu Baishui looked at it, he felt that the paper was full of raging waves. It was even more frightening than when the towel was thrown into the sky by a huge wave. It was as if the vast sea that they lived in was really sealed in the paper by a few strokes, and it would violently overflow at any time. Seeing the black light and raging waves with their own eyes didn't make people afraid. That was because even the terrifying waves were still within reason, just more violent and intense. But the scene now was something that no mortal had ever experienced, not to mention mortals. Even in the cultivation world in the past 1,000 years. Also, no one would ever witness a profound realm Daoist painting a spirit map that seemed to be able to seal the chi of the entire world into it. If someone who knew a little about this, such as Xianxia, saw what Li Yunxin did, he would be 10,000 times more surprised than Lu Baishui. In the past, when the chi of the world was not chaotic, it was extremely difficult to draw such a vast world into a painting. Even a profound painting Daoist in the mysterious realm might not be able to do it. Not to mention that the qi of the world had been messed up by Li Yunxin today. How could he do it? Of course Lu Baishui didn't know any of this. But it didn't stop this hero of the sea who didn't show any fear even when the two big monsters were fighting. He gasped and took 3 steps back before he could stabilize himself. It was just that he glanced at it. He felt as if an endless amount of seawater was pressing down on him, and he was at the bottom of the sea thousands of meters, tens of thousands of meters deep. It was dark and gloomy, and he could be trapped there forever at any time, unable to escape. He gasped for breath. It was as if he had survived a disaster, just because of that glance. Seeing him like this, Li Yunxin smiled slightly. Humph. Brother Lu, it's rare for you to have a firm mind. It's lucky that mortals dare to look at my spiritual map and don't think that they are stupid. Chapter 6:18. Lu Baishui stared blankly. He seemed to be scared out of his wits. He had never seen anything like this even though he had traveled all over the world. He couldn't care less about what Li Yunxin had said. He gasped and asked, "What is this?" While asking, he couldn't help but look at it. But as soon as he looked at the edge of the table, the palpitation overwhelmed him again, forcing him to look away. Li Yunxin didn't look at him. He was just writing. Every stroke of the brush was extremely fast. It was as if he was in the mood to paint an uninhibited freehand painting. But from the point of view of the people in this world, his paintings did not look very brilliant. A lot of colors and lines were piled together in a somewhat messy and disorderly manner. He was painting the spiritual painting just like he did in the city of Wei. When he was in the city of Wei, he temporarily raised his cultivation to the profound realm with the power of millions of ghosts and absorbed the earthly qi of the nearby mountains and rivers into his painting. Now that he was in the profound realm, he planned to try again. This kind of attempt was not a relaxing experience. For example, no matter how knowledgeable a person was, he wouldn't be willing to take a troublesome exam. There were 2 reasons why Li Yunxin was doing this. First, he found that the Dragon King of the East Sea seemed to have a close connection with this world. When one reached the profound realm in painting, he could also seal the spiritual qi of heaven and earth into his painting, forming a mysterious relationship with the real world. For example, there were waves in his painting now. Then even if he was thousands of miles away, as long as he touched the spiritual qi in the painting, he could really raise earth-shaking waves on this vast ocean. Theoretically speaking, if one's cultivation in the art of painting was high enough, so high that it far surpassed the grand supreme realm, one could even make the entire ocean, the entire world, vanish without a trace with just one stroke on the painting. But in fact, this only existed in one's imagination. For example, in the world he came from, if a person or an object ran fast enough, they could see what they looked like when they were just running. But if they couldn't surpass the speed of light, this kind of theoretical possibility based on the unified system would never be possible. But even so, there were still many things that could be done. Over the past few days, Hai Tian and the Dragon King of the East Sea had a close relationship. Therefore, doing something to this vast ocean was equivalent to doing something to the Dragon King of the East Sea. This was easy to say but difficult to do. Because if you really want to draw a person into a painting, you have to understand him very well. This understanding did not mean knowing his emotions, personality, and habits, but a deep understanding of his physiology. She knew how the spiritual aura in his body worked and every minute detail of his body. Only by clarifying all of this and then using the spiritual energy in his body as a primer, could he retain some kind of connection with him in the painting. This matter had to be explained clearly and was extremely complicated. It could be considered a profound technique in the painting path that was half taught verbally and half understood through understanding. Li Yunxin had tasted the sweetness in the city of Wei, and now he wanted to try again. However, someone had delivered himself to the door. The Dragon King of the East Sea had sent a clone. As mentioned before, the technique of transforming the soul into the real body could be practiced when one entered the realm of true. But just like when one reached the age of 22-20, he could find a girlfriend or a boyfriend to register for marriage. Not everyone could get the method to practice it. But this one actually managed to practice it, which showed that he had some magical powers. Unfortunately, he met Li Yunxin. The clone of the Dragon King of the East Sea could take down the 9th young master, who was at the peak of the realm of true, but only injured his legs. Therefore, the cultivation of his original body might be even higher than that of Li Yunxin. However, at that time, Li Yunxin had already started to draw this Ling too, and he was also a dragon, so he also had the ability to summon clouds and rain. With the two together, he was also a big demon of the mysterious realm. He easily killed the clone of the Dragon King of the East Sea, and did not let him gain any advantage. If the clone was killed by an ordinary cultivator or demon, it would not be a big deal for the Dragon King of the East Sea. His original body had a close connection with this vast ocean. In theory, as long as the qi between heaven and earth did not disappear, the cultivation of his original body could be restored very quickly. Perhaps this was the reason why no one could beat the Shinryu. If an ordinary person lost a mysterious realm clone, they would be seriously injured and it would take a long time, a huge amount of Reiki and the power of will to restore it. But this Dragon King of the East Sea was inseparable from heaven and earth. How abundant was the Reiki between heaven and earth? He was like a small water bottle under a large tank of water. Even if it was a little empty, it would quickly fill up. With such ability and reliance, no wonder he claimed to be the orthodox dragons and called the dragon son of the land trash. No wonder he dared to let his clone appear on this ship and did not take too much precautions. Unfortunately, he was unlucky to meet Li Yunxin. It was not a big deal that the clone was destroyed, but it was destroyed and kept by Li Yunxin. He kept the clone of the Dragon King and printed it on the scroll. Thus, his doppelganger became a primer, and also the eye of the array of this scroll. The Dragon King of the East Sea in the distant Penglai Island and the qi between the sea and the sky were all pulled into Li Yunxin's painting because of such a primer. Sealing this clone was like sealing the anthropomorphic East Sea. Sealing the anthropomorphic East Sea was like sealing the Dragon King of the East Sea in the Penglai Island. This kind of profound relationship was extremely difficult to understand if one was not a painter. If this painting was completed, although it couldn't be like the celestial beings in the stories where they could draw a line on a piece of paper and make that person disappear in reality, he could always add a lot of detail to it and it was guaranteed to be a big surprise. Now everything was ready. The question was whether it was possible to draw such a spirit map with the various changes and details of the vast ocean in a situation where the spiritual qi between heaven and earth was so chaotic that there was no pattern to follow. Anyone would think that it was impossible. But now Li Yunxin was still sketching on the paper seriously and casually. After adding a few more strokes, he looked at Lu Baishui. "Brother Lu, this is called Ling Tu. Have you heard of Ling Tu before?" Of course, Lu Baishui had never heard of it. He subconsciously looked at Pan He next to him. Even though Pan He was a decisive person, he was not as good as Lu Baishui at keeping a straight face. But maybe because of her background, this woman was like a beast and she was more sensitive to danger than ordinary people. Although this sense of smell had put her in danger again and again, at least for now, she frowned and shrank to the wall. Because she had realized that this Li Yunxin should be an extremely terrible person. In front of such a person, the best thing to do was not to speak, not to move, and to answer whatever was asked. That was the only way to save her life. Therefore, when she heard the conversation between Lu Baishui and Li Yunxin, she felt cold all over and secretly broke out in a cold sweat. When Lu Baishui looked at her again, the woman immediately winked at him. It seemed that she was afraid that Lu Baishui would really annoy Li Yunxin and she would also be in trouble. Li Yunxin knew what she was doing. He didn't move his eyes away from the scroll. Holding the pen in his hand, he only said lightly, "Don't worry. I also want to ask you. It seems that you have guessed who I am. Why don't you tell Brother Lu about it? If you are right, maybe immortality is waiting for you." Who dared to take the immortality he gave? Upon hearing his words, Pan He, who had been cowering in fear, immediately fell to her knees and kowtowed repeatedly. "Dragon King! Dragon King, please spare my life! Dragon King, please spare my life!" Lu Baishui was stunned. What? But Li Yunxin didn't pay attention to him. His pen moved a few more times on the paper, sketching a few unintelligible circles. After Pan He kowtowed more than 10 times and the skin on her forehead was broken, she said, "Well, I said immortality is a blessing. You said spare my life. Spare what life?" We all know what the Dragon King did in the city of Wei. Pan He was dizzy from kowtowing, so she took a rest while answering. The Dragon King also said to someone in the city of Wei. Li Yunxin finally glanced at her. "You also know this? It seems that you have done a thorough investigation. You're really annoying." It was only after he said this that he truly looked at Pan He and stopped writing. It seemed that he was going to ask this question seriously, or that he had encountered a bottleneck in his painting. "A few nights ago you came to my cabin to find me." He looked at Pan He and said expressionlessly, When you saw me, you told me that you were in charge of the Donghai Kingdom of the Freemasonry. After a few words you wanted to kill me. Tonight you went to that guy's room and took off your clothes. Tell me, did he look prettier than me or did I look uglier than him? Pan He was also stunned like Lu Baishui. On the one hand, it was because the memories in her mind because of the words of Li Yunxin reappeared in her mind as if the seal had been unlocked. On the other hand, she didn't know what Li Yunxin meant by asking her this. She tried to calm herself down quickly. She carefully recalled his tone and expression just now. He wanted to know what the last two sentences, "Does he look prettier than me?" and "Or do I look uglier than him?" were referring to and what was the deeper meaning behind them. But after a few seconds she still couldn't figure it out. Instead she felt even more confused and didn't know how to answer. Li Yunxin seemed to be angry. He glared at her. "Oh. So you don't want to hurt me now?" Hearing this, Pan He hurriedly kowtowed again. "Dragon King, please spare my life. Dragon King, please spare my life." She had heard about Li Yunxin before. Actually, it wasn't a secret in the Freemasonry. Although the Freemasonry was so big, there were more things to deal with and do besides Li Yunxin's business. But after all, for so many years, it was rare to use a large number of resources for a long time for a person. Later, Li Yunxin did a lot of great things in Yunshan. Even though she wasn't in a high position before, she still remembered the recent legendary figure in her heart. Based on the information she knew, the image of Wei River Dragon King Li Yunxin could be roughly described as moody, scheming, and decisive. She also knew that almost everywhere he went was turned into scorched earth, and very few people were spared. He was in the city of Wei. Several months later, the city of Wei was burned down. Later he went to Rong City. Soon Rong City was also occupied by the rebel army. Then he went to Pit Mountain. The lair of a mysterious realm monster for many years was blown up in the middle. Then he went to Dongting where he used to live. He was also poisoned by poisonous water. So far there were few people within a radius of dozens of miles. Then he stayed in the wild forest for some days. Now it should be called the former wild forest. Finally he went to Yunshan. Everyone knew what happened to Yunshan. This guy was shrouded in a terrible aura of destruction. Those who met him were all unlucky. Now Pan He was right under his nose and they were on the same boat. She could almost predict the fate of this boat. Hearing two questions from such a person, how was she supposed to answer? At this time Lu Baishui finally frowned. "Brother Li, Dragon King?" Li Yunxin looked at him and grinned. "I'm not a human. I'm a monster. Not only a monster but also..." Speaking up to this point his body suddenly expanded and he revealed his fiend god body. When he was still in the true realm, his godly devil body had slight changes because of the improvement of his realm. For example, the top of the original Xian scales had small golden thorns. The pair of blood-red coral antlers also seemed to be formed from many overlapping sharp light swords. Now he was in the mysterious realm and the changes of his godly devil body were also bigger. The golden light on the scales became brighter, and the light horns on his forehead became fewer and fewer, looking more and more like the two pairs of sharp blades on Shinryu's forehead. He retracted his godly devil body and said the last few words. "The monster among the monsters, the Dragon King of the land." "Brother Lu, now you know two Dragon Kings." Li Yunxin stared at him. "Which one is the king of Shinryu?" Lu Baishui's expression finally changed. He took 2 steps back, looked at Pan He and then looked at Li Yunxin. "You are..." After saying these words with a blank face, he suddenly stood still and frowned. "So what you said before, which one is true and which one is false?" Before Li Yunxin showed his godly devil body, his power was already quite terrifying. Just now, when he showed his real body, Pan He was even more frightened and she wanted to hide in a crack. Hearing Lu Baishui's words, she suddenly jumped up from the ground and shouted, "Are you crazy? How dare you talk to him like this? He is the Dragon King, the Dragon King." After shouting these words, she reached out her hand to pull Lu Baishui to stop talking and kneel down with her. However, she had been tortured and frightened the whole night, so she was no match for Lu Baishui. Before her fingers could touch the Sea King's sleeve, Lu Baishui shook his shoulder and pushed her to the side. This time he used a lot of strength. Pan He felt her hands and feet were numb, and she didn't have the strength to stand up. She had been working hard on the ship these days, but in the end, everything was out of her control. It was okay if she lost to monsters and cultivators. Now she had lost to Immortal. It was as if anyone could defeat her. Everything she was proud of had turned into paper paste. Looking at Wu Jiasong lying on the ground, she didn't know if he was dead or alive, and suddenly felt sad. Finally, she burst into tears like a crazy person. Li Yunxin looked at her and snorted. Lu Baishui was stunned when he saw her like this. But after a short while he looked up to the sky and sighed, "Good, good, good. What a good land dragon king. Just standing here was enough to scare people to the point of insanity. If you want to listen, I will tell you." Chapter 619. Let's talk about Mr. Shueiyue first. Lu Baishui looked straight at Li Yunxin without a trace of fear. "I never knew he was the Dragon King of the East Sea. Just like how I never knew you were the Dragon King of the East Sea. How did I get to know him? It's very simple. I'm a thief on the sea. One day more than 10 years ago Mr. Shueiyue found me and said that he was a strange person living in seclusion in the East Sea, working for the Dragon King of the East Sea. He asked me to help him. The help I did was something I did casually, when I plundered the merchant ships. If I caught some scholars or craftsmen I would first place them in Aquarius Bay. When there were more people he would bring them to Penglai Island in the East Sea. He said that the Dragon King of the East Sea was going to build a palace and needed such talents. After going there he could get rid of his previous poor days and live like an immortal." Li Yunxin's pen tapped on the paper again and he couldn't help but laugh, but he didn't look at Lu Baishui. "So you really believed him? Speaking of which, let me change the subject. Brother Lu, you are a righteous and upright person on the continent. But on the sea, you became a pirate who plundered the sea and even engaged in human trafficking. I really don't understand. Why did you choose such a way of life?" Li Yunxin's tone was flat, and it was hard to tell whether he was really puzzled or mocking. At this moment Lu Baishui stood in front of him looking a little embarrassed. Previously, Mr. Shueiyue set off a big wave on the sea, and the seawater soaked the bodies of the people who were still on the deck. Lu Baishui's hair and clothes were wet and stuck to his body, and he didn't look as cool as before. But at this time, after hearing Li Yunxin's question, he still looked very calm. "I became the Sea King to return a favor. I met the former Sea King on the land in my early years and received his favor. Later, before he died, he asked me to avenge him, so I naturally kept my promise. But after avenging him, there are thousands of pirates in the Aquarius Bay. If I let them go, the coastal area will suffer. The Sea King isn't the only pirate in the East Sea. The rest of the pirates, big and small." Li Yunxin nodded and raised his hand to interrupt him. "Oh, I understand. In order to repay a debt of gratitude he killed the Sea King at that time. He still had to deal with this mess in the future. If your character hasn't collapsed yet, you should be thinking of using these forces in your hands to slowly eliminate the rest of the pirates. After that we can slowly discuss the matter of surrendering to the government or enlisting them for amnesty. Then this year." He pointed at his feet. These two ships suddenly went to the stormy waves path to find the governor, saying that they had rebelled. Was it because of this? I'm guessing you're having an internal conflict. Some are willing to surrender while others want to be thieves. Lu Baishui put his hands behind his back. "You already know. There's no need for me to waste my breath." At this time, a sailor ran up from the previously chaotic bilge and asked Lu Baishui what they should do next. But as soon as he poked his head out, he saw the scene on the deck and was momentarily stunned. Lu Baishui turned around and asked the man about the situation under the boat. Li Yunxin allowed him to ask and turned to look at Pan He and Wu Jiasong. At this time he was drawing a picture on a table. Lu Baishui stood dripping wet and talked to the sailor who was looking around in bewilderment. As for Pan He, she had a mental breakdown and was wailing loudly. Now no one was paying attention to her and she was sobbing softly. Wu Jiasong was lying beside her, not knowing if he was dead or alive. She cried for a while and crawled over to feel his pulse. Li Yunxin could somewhat understand this woman's mood at this time. She was originally a Freemasonry master with her own business. Although the man beside her was good to her, it was nothing compared to the vast space in her career. She boarded the boat and wanted to entice Xiaxing to go to Dragon Island. She originally thought that it would not be easy but not too difficult. Once she succeeded, she would be promoted and become a CEO or general manager. From then on she would completely get rid of the days of squeezing into the subway from 9 to 5, lacking sleep and constantly worrying about being fired. She would also have a scattered and unmotivated other half at home, who knew that when she really stepped into another world she would know how terrible it was there. From the outside it looked like a fantasy, magnificent and extravagant life. In fact, it was treacherous and treacherous. Only then did she realize that her cultivation was not enough and she barely lived. No one on the boat was someone she could fight. They were all more powerful than her and more capable than her. She suffered setbacks at every step. She lost her past and didn't get a bright future. So she began to miss the fragmented warmth and simplicity of the past. Regardless of whether this feeling was long-lasting or temporary, at this moment, Pan He must have lost all her self-confidence and self-esteem, and when she was in an extremely low mood, she once again remembered Wu Jiasong's good side. Fortunately, the slap wasn't light, but it wasn't fatal. She wanted to stab him again but was stopped by Mr. Shueiyue. Then she saw Li Yunxin appear. She knew that this matter was over. Originally he wanted to get close to Xiaxing. But with Li Yunxin, that fiend around, what else could he do? Li Yunxin looked at her shivering and miserable appearance in the cold wind and rain and laughed. It's a little too late to regret now. I guess your man has a skull fracture and brain hemorrhage. His liver was also ruptured by you. Oh, his intestines are like fried dough twist. Won't he shit out of his mouth later? Speaking to this point, he paused for a moment before continuing. Anyway, it's hard to save him with medicine. How about this? You tell me everything you know about the Freemasons' hideout and personnel system. I'll save his life. How about this? Pan He looked at him with tears in her eyes. You, she wanted to agree. But there was always a glimmer of hope in her heart, like a spark hidden in the embers. She felt that maybe by chance, there might be a chance to turn things around. She had lost too much and was about to become a bankrupt gambler. Although stopping was a wise choice, there was also the terrifying temptation of turning things around. Just as she was hesitating, the cabin door on the second floor finally opened with a loud bang. When Mr. Shueiyue was here, she used her supernatural power to seal the cabin door. Thus, Xiaxing was trapped inside, not knowing what had happened outside. At this time, since Mr. Shueiyue's doppelganger had dispersed, the restriction had also loosened. But even so, it took a lot of effort to blast open the cabin door. He saw the scene in front of him. Xiaxing saw Li Yunxin first and immediately froze, speechless for a moment. Who would have thought that so many days had passed since they parted in Dingzhou, and now that they were on the sea, he would meet this person again? After being stunned for 2 breaths' time, he forcibly suppressed the fluctuating expression on his face. Standing at the cabin door, he cupped his hands together like a hoodlum. I didn't expect to meet you here again. Really? But Li Yunxin pointed a finger at him. Xiaxing's expression and movements immediately froze on his face. His body had completely left his control, turning into a clay statue. I'm very unhappy with you now. You can stand as punishment first. Li Yunxin glanced at him, his gaze once again landing on Pan He. You played with this guy for an entire night. In the end, after using a medicinal dregs to heal you, you still have to dig it out of your mouth. It really makes me sad to see this. Since you can't decide whether or not to save your man, then ask him himself. As he said this, he suddenly flicked his finger. At the tip of his finger, a golden pill flew into Wu Jiasong's mouth with a whoosh. Wu Jiasong was unconscious, his mouth tightly shut, so his teeth were all shattered. But what was surprising was that the moment the teeth shattered, not even the dregs splashed out, they grew back as if in a mirage. Not only the teeth, but the bruises and blood on his face that had been caused by the collision also healed. His skin was as smooth as a baby's. His entire person looked as soft as a 180-kilogram child. The man who had narrowly escaped death let out a spasmodic gasp and suddenly opened his eyes. Like he had just woken up from a dream, he was muddle-headed for a moment and couldn't figure out the situation. Li Yunxin pointed his finger at him and stopped him. Let's take things one by one. Brother Lu, now that you've finished explaining, can you continue? At this time, Lu Baishui had already given the sailor many instructions and sent him away. There were only these few people left on the deck. However, the relationship between these few people was extremely complicated, and they were constantly scheming against each other. It was even more lively than the 100 or so people in the cabin. He looked at Xiaxing, Wu Jiasong and Pan He. Then he looked at Li Yunxin. You can already guess what I want to say. As for you saying that I am a human trafficker, before I kidnapped people I asked them all. Those who had good family backgrounds, wives and parents to support, I let them go when I could. Most of the people I took away were exiled and had a poor life. Maybe there were times when I made mistakes, but I was originally a pirate. I tried my best. As for Mr. Shueyue, Lu Baishui looked at Li Yunxin. According to my understanding of him, he is a man of his word. Even if he is a demon, he is not a demon that eats people. Li Yunxin stopped writing and listened to him. After a while he looked up at him. That's it? Lu Baishui sighed. That's it. Huh? You are saying good things about him in front of me. Brother Lu, you are really brave. I'm just telling the truth. If you are angry because of this, you can kill me to vent your anger. But my brothers on the ship don't know. I have already told them. If I die, I will still send you to Aquarius Bay. Brother Li, you can rest assured. Li Yunxin clicked his tongue and shook his head. Brother Lu, you are the first one to make me angry and live until now. Do you know why I am so tolerant of you? Lu Baishui did not speak. Li Yunxin picked up her brush and thought for a while. She said softly, there are different kinds of people. The first kind are good people. Good people are naturally good people. Honest, friendly, amiable, decent and moral. But these kinds of people are too few. His eyes returned to the paper. There were some shapes on the paper. It was not a drawing method known to this world. Big and small whirlpools and circles densely covered the sea and sky. At first glance it made people feel strange and frightened, as if the whole world was made up of these flowing circles and lines, and if they were not careful they would be sucked in. Chapter 620. Lu Baishui frowned suspiciously. He didn't know why Li Yunxin suddenly talked about good people. He wasn't young and naive. In fact, because of his special background, he knew that there were almost no good people in this world. Almost everyone did things for the sake of profit. Even those who preach about benevolence, righteousness, and morality, and seem to practice what they preach, might not have the opportunity to do evil. So he gave up thinking about what was good and bad and just did things. He was like this. His brother Li didn't hesitate to kill people, and he was a demon. Did he really believe in good and bad? He was confused and couldn't understand. Just like how Pan he couldn't understand what was the deeper meaning behind he is prettier than me, and I am uglier than him. He heard Li Yunxin say, the second type are ordinary people. Ordinary people and good people don't look very different. But ordinary people will do evil when they have the chance. But if they don't have the chance, they won't create the chance to do evil. There are many of these people in the mortal world. But in the cultivation world, in the demon world, and even among the mortals I have met, they are rare. He added a few more strokes on the scroll and glanced at Pan He. The third type are bad people. For example, this woman. She's like ordinary people usually. But the difference is that ordinary people have the chance to do evil, and they know their limits. One person found a shop door open and ran in to steal a few things. But they know their limits and they don't dare to hire more people and empty the whole shop. But this woman can do great things and do great evil. So she is a very, very bad person. Pan He shrank back. She glanced at Wu Jiasong and then quickly looked away. Lu Baishui didn't know what he meant by this. But at this point he still smiled faintly and said, shouldn't the third type be evil? Bad people. Li Yunxin smiled. In my world, how can they be considered bad people? Real bad people don't treat people as people. They only treat them like plants, and they don't feel guilty when using them. This woman was still far from being an evil person. That person is the real villain. After saying this, he pointed at Xianxia. There are many people like him. Cultivators and fiendish demons were mostly of the fourth type. I don't like any of them. Lu Baishui thought for a moment. Then which one am I? You're somewhere between the first and the second. Li Yunxin narrowed his eyes and looked at him. People like you are hard to come by in my world. You've lied to me the first time and the second time, so much so that I can't bear to kill you to vent my anger. Thinking, there are so many bastards in the world and the world is dark and gloomy. People like you and old Lu are the only light I can see. It would be a pity to kill you. Although I'm also a bastard, I'm also a person who loves beauty. Even if you aren't a good person, who wouldn't like a good person? Lu Baishui was silent about this evaluation. When he met Li Yunxin for the first time, his evaluation of Li Yunxin was probably the first type. A rare, talented, and gentle person. But later he found that his appearance began to change, and it became more and more beyond his imagination. At this moment Lu Baishui didn't know how to evaluate him. He was a fiendish demon. And a fiendish demon among fiendish demons. It was hard to comment on the standard of using people. Now he talked about the difference between good and evil and said that he was a good person. What did he want to do? Just because he was a good person, he wouldn't make things difficult for him, right? But just as this thought came to his mind, he heard Li Yunxin say, I realized this when I saw this bastard and this evil person together tonight. I really can't bear to kill you. It's like when I'm admiring flowers and my hand is pricked by thorns, but I can't bear to crush the flowers. So we're fine. I believe what you said. When we arrive at Aquarius Bay, I'll go see where you met Shui Yu and see what kind of people she needs, and then I won't bother you anymore. Lu Baishui frowned. You? He wanted to ask, is this true? But he also felt that if he asked it would be rude to Brother Li and also to himself. He was prepared to die, in the worst-case scenario. But now the clouds suddenly parted and the moon brightened up, which made him a little helpless. So he was stunned for a while and then said, Brother Li, you're so broad-minded. Li Yunxin laughed. You saved yourself. If you are the second or third kind of person. Originally, I planned to care about your life and death when we reached the sea. So you see, evil people are annoying. Speaking of this, he pointed at Xianxia. You're an annoying evil person. Damn it. Previously, I kept you alive and coaxed you not to force yourself because I thought I could get more information by secretly observing you. But no. First of all, I understand one thing. Second of all, you and I have been exposed. Li Yunxin's expression became cold. So I don't have the mood to play with you anymore. 3 questions. First, what kind of world do you come from? Second, what secrets do you have? Third, what kind of person is a celestial being? After saying these, I'll let you die a quick death. Because of this finger, Xianxia could move freely. But now that he had some cultivation, he knew better than Lu Baishui how strong this person in front of him was. Not to mention anything else, just the pill he used to save that man just now. Compared to the pill he used to treat Panhe's injuries and dug out of her mouth, it was like the world's top delicacy was rotten food in the mud. This thing, he used it to save Immortal. Xianxia slowly moved his body, aware of a strong sense of crisis. He calmed himself down and let out a sigh. You really are not one of us. So who are you? He had reason to believe that one of us was protecting him. Maybe he would have to wait for the real crisis to appear, or maybe he would need time to come. So he wanted to delay as much time as possible. After the enemy succeeded, it was usually effective to induce him to reveal his identity and purpose. It was not unreasonable for villains to like to talk a lot. Ordinary people would like to show off when they bought a new affordable product, not to mention a victory that was a matter of life and death. Li Yunxin said softly, Me? I was once mistaken for you by your people. I suffered for you and also enjoyed a blessing for you. But in the end I found you before your people. If you are still asking me questions after the count of 3, you will die miserably. Now let me say it. When he said these words, he did not avoid the 3 people on the deck and his hands did not stop. But it seemed that his creation had hit a bottleneck and his pen moved slowly, and from time to time he looked up at Xianxia as if he wanted to look at him carefully. If Xianxia knew painting, he should be terrified now. Because Li Yunxin was carefully observing the flow of his qi, his appearance and his form. Xianxia was shocked. If what Li Yunxin said was true, it meant that he might really fall into this guy's hands now, and the help he thought before was gone. He wanted to save himself. Between momentum and power, he barely had the former. Realizing this, he no longer maintained a cautious and humble attitude, and also laid his cards on the table. I see. Good. So from the time you met me, I have always been in your plan. So the little monster protection you said before was also misled by you? Xianxia said as he looked at Li Yunxin's expression. The latter did not hide his pride or affirmation, so Xianxia immediately got the answer. He smiled and shook his head, pacing 2 steps. Since you can ask me where I come from, then you are not from our world. But you should know a little about us. I will tell you one thing. My world is far more powerful than you can imagine. You people are trapped on the ground in the sea and you feel free to fly in the sky. But in my world we travel the universe and break the void. You should have a general idea of what I said. You can threaten me. But if I die, someone else will come, Xianxia said calmly. I advise you not to be my enemy. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. This reaction made Xianxia feel a little relieved. So he wanted to change his tone and say something else. To give this person a way out, temporarily get over this disaster. And then, but he saw Li Yunxin smile, travel the universe and break the void. You want to say you can travel the universe? Xiaxing was stunned. Lu Baishui and Pan He were also stunned. But the two of them did not know what travel the universe meant, and Xiaxing was confused because how could he say these words? If he knew these words, why did he ask where he came from? If what you said is true, it is indeed more powerful than my world. But you didn't answer my question. You have one last chance to answer my 3 questions honestly. Now I will say 2. Xiaxing frowned in surprise. Are you crazy? Since you are not from here, you should know that this place can be destroyed at any time. What I know is the only way to save you. How dare you threaten me now? Destroyed at any time? Li Yunxin tilted his head and thought for a moment. Fresh. Do you mean at any time? Or a few thousand years later, at most 100,000 years? Xiaxing stared at him. Maybe we don't have the same definition of the word at any time. At least a few thousand years. That's enough for me to live freely. Li Yunxin thought for a moment. So now you still want to hide it from me? I will say 3. Xiaxing was even more surprised. Even if it's 1,000 years, are you willing to stay here? It's not like you haven't seen the outside world. Can you endure here? Li Yunxin sighed and interrupted him. Why not? For me, my life in this world, at least for now, is the real life, my friend. As he said, he put down his pen, took out a scroll from his sleeve and unfolded it on the table. Chapter 621. The 3 mortals didn't dare to look at the painting on the table. However, Xiaxing could look at it. It was a long scroll. On it there were some childish images drawn on it, and there were also names marked on top of their heads. If he didn't see it wrongly, the name of the scroll should be, Visiting the Zoo on a Sunny Morning. Then Li Yunxin frowned slightly and gestured with her fingers on the drawings one by one, as if she was trying to find the one she wanted. She muttered without rhyme or reason, I know you. You're the same as me. You have a different background, so you naturally have a sense of superiority. You should be the center of your life. In your eyes, you are the main character of this world. Of course, what's worse is that this is the truth. You hid in the mountains for so many years, and every misfortune turned into a blessing. Even now you are still growing. You are so talented and you reached the emptiness realm in just 10 days. Huh. I still have many plans for the future. Even now, I am still thinking about what to do and what to do next. It's hard to feel hopeless, and I don't believe what will happen to me. At this point, Li Yunxin's finger stopped on the painting and pointed. Found it. Mermaid sex. Good. That's it. Then he raised his head and looked at Xiaxing, whose brows were tightly furrowed, as if he was still trying to guess what Li Yunxin wanted to do and what tricks she was going to use to deal with him. Now I will say 3. He knocked on the scroll with his finger. A gust of demonic wind suddenly rose from the table. A huge body quickly formed in the demonic wind. It looked like a 3-meter-tall strong man. Its upper body was that of a human and its lower body was that of a fish. However, it only looked like it. Its face was ferocious and dirty, as if its skin had been peeled off and was covered with slimy mucus. Its body was also covered with mucus, but there was also something else that seemed out of place. Barnacles. Barnacles were recognized by people who lived by the sea. Small, sharp-edged things that were thickly spread over the rocks and under the bottom of the ship. If someone accidentally brushed against the rocks covered with barnacles, their skin would be torn open. Now the body and tail of the segmented mermaid were covered in this stuff. They were densely packed like the scales of dragons. However, the scariest part was where the human body and the fishtail met. There was actually a long, protruding crevice in what looked like a person's crotch. As soon as the beast appeared, Li Yunxin drew a circle in the air and restrained it. It rolled and howled in the circle as if it was suffering great torture. Then the crack beneath him suddenly opened, and out popped a giant object the size of an adult's arm. In the end, it was a non-human beast. Even that thing was covered in barnacles, barely concealing the bulging veins on it, so it wasn't too shameful. Li Yunxin had suddenly released such a monster. For a moment no one knew what he was going to do. With a flick of his finger, another golden core shot into the strange beast's mouth. Instantly, a deafening shriek numbed everyone's eardrums. The monster's body expanded even more after receiving the elixir's power. With bright light shooting out from its eyes, it stared at Pan He on the deck and stuck out its stinky red tongue, wanting to grab her in its arms and squeeze her dry. Pan He had been ravaged by Xiaxing before, and the scene was still vivid in her mind. Now seeing the thing on the strange beast that was as thick as her thigh, she was so frightened that she even forgot to cry. However, Li Yunxin only snorted coldly. He waved his hand. The invisible barrier that was trapping the strange beast suddenly expanded, trapping Xianxia within it. Even though Xianxia didn't know what Li Yunxin was going to do, he knew that this horrifying strange beast wasn't a good one. Golden light flashed in his hand and 12 light swords appeared around him. While flying to the side, he shouted at Li Yunxin, "What are you doing? You dare to kill me? You're seeking death. Idiot." However, the merman wasn't interested in Xianxia at this moment. His horrifying face was pressed against the seal, his thick and hideous arms were about to tear the seal apart as he pounced on Pan He. One of the fish's tails was flapping loudly, and the giant creature was also swaying wildly behind the restrictive spell. It was so frightening that one felt like their liver was going to explode. Li Yunxin ignored it. Instead he looked at Lu Baishui, who was dumbfounded. "Brother Lu, this thing is called a merman. Said to be a strange beast that lives in the sea. Have you seen it before?" How could Lu Baishui say anything? He just shook his head subconsciously. Li Yunxin picked up the brush again and waved his finger at Wu Jiasong, making him tilt his head so that he could see Xianxia. While continuing to draw, he said, "It's said that this thing is lascivious." Lascivious? Of course, it wants to lascivious the opposite sex first. But if there is no opposite sex, it's okay for a man to do it. Because this thing doesn't eat seafood and needs to collect yang and yin essence to live. If it yells at me rudely like this, it will notice it soon. At that time, ha ha ha. Hearing this, Xianxia's hatred was about to burst. He raised his voice and yelled at Li Yunxin, "Idiot! Do you know what it means if you kill me?" "No one will know in 1,000 years, but Li Yunxin smiled at Lu Baishui. "Brother Lu, listen to this. A man shouldn't think too highly of himself. He acts like the world will be destroyed without him. Don't you hate him?" Saying this, the merman stopped roaring at Pan He. This kind of strange beast was naturally sensitive to spiritual power, and it knew that the barrier in front of it was not something it could break. Suddenly turned around and stared at Xianxia. Xianxia was startled and flicked his fingers. 4 flying swords shot out with a buzzing sound. The strange beast didn't dodge but took the 4 swords. Not even a scratch was left on it. Instead, the golden swords turned into spots of light. This could only mean there was a huge gap between them. Seeing this, Xianxia was stunned. Knowing that there was no other way, he finally yelled, "Fine. Take it first, I'll talk." Li Yunxin finally turned around and looked at him. After 2 breaths of time, when the merman was close to him, he sighed, "If you were so smart, why did you come?" Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief. "Get it out of here." But Li Yunxin laughed, "But it's too late. As you all know, I'm an honest man." His face turned cold. "Enjoy the feeling of being used as a tool." Before Xianxia could say anything, the merman's huge body suddenly pounced over and hugged him. A spot of light suddenly appeared in his arms, which was the golden swords protecting Xianxia were all broken. Screams sounded. Li Yunxin flicked his fingers and the barrier disappeared. The merman suddenly turned around, holding Xianxia tightly and falling into the water. The screams suddenly stopped and only the sound of water splashing could be heard. The force was so strong that even the huge ship seemed to be swaying rhythmically. After 3 or 4 breaths of time, a large amount of red blood appeared on the surface of the sea. The onlookers were dumbfounded. Li Yunxin, however, frowned. "Useless stuff." He hooked the merman with his free hand. The merman's huge body was like a fish on a hook, and it was pulled up by an invisible force, tossing and turning continuously. They also saw that the strange beast was holding a human figure tightly in its arms. The reason why it was a human figure was because the skin on its head was torn and the flesh was exposed. Especially in its mouth there was a bloody hole. At this moment, it wasn't its mouth that was injured but its lower body. The lower body roared angrily because it was pulled out of the water and it moved vigorously. Every time it moved, a large amount of flesh and blood would splatter. Even Lu Baishui frowned and looked away. However, one person didn't turn his head. Instead, he stared at the merman, and the light in his eyes seemed to be even brighter than the merman's. It was Wu Jiasong. Xianxia had reached the emptiness realm, but he still had the strength to speak. Well. The merman seemed to hate people talking. As soon as it heard him speak, it immediately turned the body in its hand and struck it hard. With a paw sound, brains splattered everywhere. It actually pierced through the head of an emptiness realm cultivator. Xianxia finally stopped breathing. He couldn't be more dead. However, the merman's corpse was still there. Lu Baishui couldn't bear to watch. Li Yunqing was quite interested. He clicked his tongue and said, "This merman has such a strong spirit. Can even compete with a strange beast called a teddy. Wu clan's shopkeeper, do you feel better watching it?" Wu Jiaseng was frozen, so he couldn't say anything. But the resentful splendor in her eyes clearly answered his question. Li Yunqing waved his hand and patted the scroll. The merman, which was originally transformed by the demonic wind, suddenly turned back into the demonic wind in midair. He became the abstract and funny figure on the scroll again. Xianxia's body fell on the deck. He could not bear to see it. Only a head and 4 limbs could be seen. His body had turned into a bloody paste. The merman's body was full of barnacles that were as sharp as knives. It was hard to imagine how painful it was to fall into the sea while carrying him. But compared to the physical pain, perhaps the mental torture was even more fatal. He was shocked like a wooden statue. He didn't move or speak. Lu Baishui took a few steps back to stay away from the corpse. He was ready to die when he talked to Li Yunqing. Now when he saw Xianxia's miserable state, he took a deep breath. If it was him just now, once he had this thought, he immediately moved his eyes away from Li Yunqing. A quarter of an hour ago he dared to comment on Brother Li. But now, after witnessing what he had done, he felt that there was nothing more to say. It wasn't because he was disappointed. But, when 2 ordinary people met, they might be able to make some comments about each other. Even if one of them had more wealth and power, as long as it was within an acceptable range, they would still be able to remain calm and collected in relative situations. However, if one of them had the most powerful power in the world, such as becoming an emperor, then it was unlikely that he would have a friend. And it would be difficult for that friend to comment on him. Because from a certain point of view, they were already 2 different kinds of creatures. Lu Baishui now saw Li Yunqing's magical powers and methods. He finally realized that the person in front of him was not his brother Li. He was a demon, not a human. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.